I apologize. We'll get started. We'll start here. So these are things to keep in mind when making. This is a public forum to receive comments on the proposed regulation. It is not intended to be a forum for debate or defense of the regulations. The responses by the board to all recommendations or objections will be included in the final statement of reasons as part of the rulemaking filed by the Office of Administrative Law. In addition, during the hearing, commenters will be allotted no more than 5 minutes to provide comment orally on the proposed regulation text, depending on the number of commenters. As indicated in the subscriber alert on June 7, 2024, the board respectively requests, but does not require, that persons who make oral comments during this hearing also submit a written copy of the testimony today via email. The email for submission is on the screen, pharmacyrulemaking@dca.ca.gov. In addition, as included in the subscriber alert, it is helpful for comments to be specifically referenced to the proposed section and subdivision, the proposed text, and the specific recommendation if possible. If you believe your oral comments will exceed 5 minutes limit, you are encouraged to submit your comments in writing today. Again, the email for submission comments is on the screen. Thirdly, if you have a question about a proposed regulation, please rephrase your question to a comment. For example, instead of asking what does the subdivision mean, you can state that the language is unclear and explain why you find it unclear. To reiterate our process today is a regulatory hearing on the board's proposed regulation on compound. This is not a board of pharmacy meeting or a committee meeting. There will be no responses to testimony provided other than to acknowledge the receipt of comments. It is anticipated that review and consideration of all comments received will occur at the July 31st through August 1st board meeting. After all interested parties have been heard, the public hearing today. I'll now ask the meeting moderator to provide instructions on how to provide comments via WebEx.
Thank you. Before we get started, I would like to remind board members and staff who are not speaking to mute their microphone during today's meeting. If background noise is detected as a result of unmuted microphones, I will mute those microphones. For the purpose of today's meeting, when the board opens for public comment, members of the public who would like to provide comment in person at the in-person location can approach the table and microphone at the front of the room. For those joining us on WebEx, we will be utilizing the WebEx question and answer and hand raise features to facilitate public comment. When public comment is called, I will open the question and answers feature, which you will hear me refer to as the Q&A. And members of the public who wish to make a comment can click on the Q&A icon, type the word comment in the text box, and click on the send button. To utilize hand raise feature, simply click on the hand icon next to your name to raise and lower your hand. Those who have called into the meeting can dial *3 to raise and lower their hand. So we'll take public comment from the in-person location first, and then I will call for those requesting comment through WebEx. And I return the floor back to the board.
Thank you. Before we begin taking comments, I would like to first remind everyone about the background and the development of these regulations that began long ago in 2019 in anticipation of those features that were supposed to be effective in 2020. Meetings began in February 2019. Follow along the slides. The first meeting focused on education of the proposed revisions to USP 795 regarding pharmaceutical compounding non-sterile preparations. This was followed by additional educational meetings, including in March 2019, when a public meeting was convened to focus on the education of the proposed revisions to USP 797 pharmaceutical compounding sterile preparations, and on an April 2019 public meeting that was convened to focus on the education of the new proposed Chapter 800 hazardous drugs handling in healthcare settings. In addition, in June 2019, a public meeting was held focusing on the education of the provision of the new proposed chapter 825, radiopharmaceuticals, preparation, compounding, description, and packaging. Following these educational meetings in July 2019, the compounding committee considered proposed amendments to regulations related to pharmaceutical compounding of non-sterile corporations. In September 2019, the compounding committee met on 2 occasions on September 5th and September 24th, where the committee and stakeholders focused on discussion and consideration of proposed regulations relating to pharmaceutical compounding of sterile corporations. During the July 2019 meetings in September, the committee again engaged in a collaborative process, reviewing and editing proposed text during meetings as a response to comments received from the stakeholders during the meeting. November 5th, 2019, in addition, in light of the delays of USP, the committee considered a draft policy statement to provide stakeholders with guidance on the applicability of board compounding regulations and USP compounding chapters while pending appeals that were before the USP. I believe it's important to note that in addition to the committee meetings, stakeholders were also provided with opportunities to provide informal feedback to the board during board meetings throughout 2019 as agendas. Following the USP consideration of appeals and finalization of the chapters, the Enforcement and Compounding Committee resumed its efforts to review the board's compounding regulations in 2023. Specifically, in January 2023, the committee and stakeholders received a presentation providing an overview of the federal requirements for compounding under Section 503A. Further, this meeting, the committee and stakeholders received an educational presentation on Chapter 825 regarding radiopharmaceuticals. Following the presentation, the committee and stakeholders considered proposed regulations for radiopharmaceuticals using the same collaborative process used in 2018. In February 2023, the committee and stakeholders received a presentation on USP Chapter 795, Pharmaceutical Compounding Non-Sterile Corporations. Following the presentation, the committee and stakeholders considered the draft proposed regulation text. As with the approach taken in 2019, the language was reviewed and considered in a very collaborative manner, with edits being made during the meeting based on stakeholders' feedback. In 2023, in March 2023, the committee and stakeholders received a presentation on USP Chapter 797, Pharmaceutical Compounding Sterile Preparations. Following the presentation, the committee and stakeholders considered the draft proposed regulations text related to pharmaceutical compounding of sterile preparations. In April 2023, the committee and stakeholders received a presentation on USP Chapter 800, hazardous drugs, handling in healthcare settings. Again, following the presentation, committee and stakeholders considered draft proposed regulations text for hazardous drugs. The proposed regulations were considered by the full board during its April 19th through 20th, 2023 board meeting. The board voted at that time to initiate this rulemaking related to non-sterile compounding, sterile compounding, handling of hazardous drugs, and radiopharmaceuticals. To address an issue related to respirators and medical surveillance, minor changes were approved by the board during the September 2023 meeting. Just so that now we're level set. Understanding that the USP chapters became effective on November 1st, 2023. That was last year, USP chapters became effective. And we understood that the board's proposed regulations would not yet be effective. The board released a big policy on September 12, 2023, providing stakeholders with additional guidance. Thank you for your patience as I provided the history of the actions that were taken by the board to develop language for promulgation. The board has been very thorough, thoughtful, and deliberative in its consideration. The board and I appreciate the comments that were received during the prior public. I look forward to considering the comments that we did just received in the 45-day written comment period, as well as the comments that we received today during the hearing. These will be considered at a future board meeting.
Thank you, everyone, for your understanding. I think we've dealt with the technology. Although everyone could hear before, I think you should be able to hear much better now. Appreciate that. Thank you for coming back. As a reminder to those in Sacramento, if you plan to provide comments, please make sure you've signed in at the door. Okay, we're ready to begin with comments. I will now call on those persons who are present in Sacramento location wishing to provide testimony regarding the board's proposed action. I will be calling individuals in the order of the sign-up sheet. And then individuals participating via WebEx will be called after that. I have the sign-up sheet here, but as we begin, I will ask staff moderating the meeting to monitor the time allotted for each commenter and ensure that the recording of the meeting is maintained throughout the hearing. You may want to consider not repeating previous comments to maximize your time. You can say you agree with an individual's previous comments, and we also have your written comments if you've submitted them. Okay, so let's begin. Okay. The first person to provide testimony is Dr. June18, MD.
Thank you for pronouncing my name correctly. That often does not happen. I would like to thank the board for this opportunity and laud you for your efforts on patient protection. I represent the California Derm Society, known as CalDerm, as well as the many patients that I serve and my fellow dermatologists serve in the state of California. And I would like to testify specifically how proposed regulations could have the unintended consequences of hurting our patients. Early in my career, we discovered that if we inject lidocaine that's buffered with sodium bicarbonate, it hurts a lot less for our patients. In my career as a board-certified dermatologist and board-certified Mohs surgeons, I've personally injected hundreds of thousands of syringes of buffered lidocaine that has been prepared in my private practice. Multiply that by the number of dermatologists in the state, there are probably millions of syringes of buffered lidocaine that have been injected in California without incident. The pharmacy literature suggests that buffered lidocaine is stable for as short as 7 days and as long as 28 days. Published literature in the dermatology literature shows that lidocaine in syringes fails to grow bacteria or fungus at up to a month. That being said, I would just hope that you take into consideration the ability of physicians to buffer lidocaine in our practices for the benefit of our patients. For those of you who are unfamiliar with this practice, I extend an open invitation to my office where I will inject one arm with buffered lidocaine and one arm with unbuffered lidocaine, and you will get the point of why it's critical that whatever regulations go into effect preserve physicians' ability to buffer lidocaine in our offices. We do not have access to licensed pharmacists in our offices. This would be an untenable and unbearable regulation if that went into effect. So I would just hope that there is some sort of carve out or some sort of consideration given to physicians to have the ability to buffer lidocaine for our patients. It will only serve our patients, and it will create unnecessary pain and suffering if we no longer are able to do that. I thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Potoskan. Next, we have Dr. Melanie Horn.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Melanie Horn. I come from Sutter Health, and we did submit public comment in advance. So I'm going to speak more generally Sutter Health values our chance to speak to the board about the opportunity to influence the proposed regulations for non-sterile compounding, sterile compounding, and hazardous drugs. We do support and endorse standards that enhance safe and efficacious compounded drug preparations. Sutter Health serves over 3.3 million patients. We have over 12,000 physicians, 4,500 aligned medical groups, over 2,000 advanced practice clinicians, 15,000 plus nurses, 50,000 plus employees, 27 acute care campuses, 4,000 inpatient beds, over 300 clinics, ambulatory surgery centers, and urgent cares. We're also the 12th largest home health organization with over 700,000 visits annually. We have, our entities work together to meet the needs of our Sutter Health patients in California, and our pharmacy is comprised of over 2,000 licensed pharmacy individuals who have met and discussed the many pages that were proposed for the USP regulation. One of the overwhelming comments is that some of these regulations as USP Plus do a lot to make a standard that's higher for pharmacy, but other licensed individuals in the state of California are not held to those same standards. And unfortunately, what that does is it pushes the ability for pharmacists and pharmacy personnel who do hold USP to the standard and do hold up those requirements. They're being asked to do more when others aren't held to account to do those minimums. And so what that really does is it drives the ability for pharmacy and pharmacy personnel to influence patient safety and consumers in California. A couple examples that really have a humongous impact on our healthcare organizations and their cost and ability to deliver care has to do with some of the examples have to do with 1735D, the essential copy. We made comments where, as written, does not allow us to distinguish compounds from non-compounds. Additionally, there are implications where biologic medications in the statements of whole blood being manipulated. There are examples where whole blood is actually provided from the FDA, and we have to be able to prepare those for our patients. Another big impact is with immediate use compounding. Making situational requirements for immediate use and continuing to propagate that standard forward makes a different standard for pharmacy than it does for other healthcare providers who do not do the work well. And so we have put forward suggestions to not have unrestricted immediate use, but to really understand the impact of how giving pharmacy a different standard really matters. Some other really key things are requiring things that could close our pharmacies for shortages of supplies like sterile mats or changing sterile gloves continuously throughout the day. These have major impacts to our healthcare organization in cost, waste, without demonstrating safety. We want to implore to the board to really value and look at how that impacts patient care if we're told we cannot compound hazardous drugs because we do not have a sterile mat in the hazardous compounding area. Additionally, I want to also notate that there are different standards throughout the 3 chapters proposed for things like incubator cleaning requirements or temperature regulations, and we've highlighted those in our comments. And so another ask from Sutter is to really try to provide harmony and continuity between standards that are very similar, such as radiopharmaceuticals and sterile compounding and non-hazardous compounding where possible, and align that language so that we can all have a clear standard in those different areas of compounding. And so I'd like to just close by saying thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I definitely should not have signed in second.
Thank you, Dr. Horn. Next, we have Marcy Bencomo. I believe that's correct.
Hi, my name is Marcy Bencomo, representing Pacifica Compounding Pharmacy in Torrance, California. Can you hear me now? Do I need to repeat that? Okay. My name is Marcy Bencomo, representing Pacifica Compounding Pharmacy in Torrance, California, that has been compounding non-sterile since 1983. After being in business for 40 years, and I'm not a pharmacist myself, I support the pharmacists in our pharmacy, and I also am a patient myself. So I have an eye on that patient care that we need. We appreciate your role, and I believe that we have a mutual goal and interest in providing access to care for patients with a high quality of care and to also ensure patient safety. So the regulations that are being proposed, they don't appear to aid really in reaching those goals. As much of what is proposed might be come across as redundant or overly restrictive, along with a direction that is somewhat confusing. So where we have standards that are already in place, new regulations that speak to the same guidance should be eliminated. There needs to be a mutual understanding of what is written in these guidelines. As a result of what's been written, we would be forced to spend more time and more money, which falls on the patient's experience ultimately, having them endure more cost and wasted time without providing better care or safety for them. Our small business would suffer economically. In section 1735.11, it describes the SOPs for non-sterile compounding, but these SOPs are already covered in USP 795. Adding these to the guidelines is really unnecessary, we feel, and doesn't add to patient safety. In section 3, to have all complaints related to a potential quality problem with CNSP should be reevaluated. If all complaints are reviewed within 72 hours and reported to the Board of Pharmacy, the board would be overloaded with complaints that include not just items specific to quality, but everything from what it smells like to the texture to the color, how the medication is dispensed from the bottle or container it's in, and the perceived potency. This dilutes the complaints and would drown out the ones that really deserve the high priority. It also inundates the pharmacy with making all complaints a high priority to review and report, having to have less focus on things that really do matter, and as a result, leaving the patient without any better care or safety. With regards to 1735.2, section C, that centers around training, this is really important because we have a small number of staff that are dedicated to certain aspects of the business. If any compounding personnel fail on an aspect of training, he or she would not be allowed to be involved in compounding. This isn't really clear what that means, but this doesn't, to us, make a lot of sense. It makes sense for them to not be involved with the aspect they failed until they successfully pass that aspect, but they could be working on other aspects of compounding that have nothing to do with the aspect they failed on. So if they were failing at a sublingual form, a medication, then they need to work on that, but maybe they could work on capsules. That's just an example. Having personnel not work on any compounding costs money and time and ultimately hurts the patients and our small business. In 1735.1 FB, no CNSP shall be prepared that is a copy of one, this was mentioned prior, or more commercially available drug products unless the compounding produces a clinically significant difference for the medical need of an identified individual patient, determined by the prescribing practitioner, the compounding pharmacist, and dispensing pharmacist. In our case, and I know in many others, the compounding pharmacist may be the dispensing pharmacist. So there may be some redundancy there, and I'm not really sure why we have two pharmacists who need to review that.
15-second warning.
Federal guidelines already states that the prescribing practitioner determine what the copy is. So we recommend that we keep with that so that you don't have two individuals from the pharmacy misusing their time.
5 minutes are up.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Vipal Patel.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Thank you. I'm Vipul Patel. I'm the Executive Director at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. Appreciate this opportunity to provide comments. On behalf of our pharmacists and our technicians at Cedars-Sinai, we did submit written comments, and we appreciate that opportunity. Also, I want to just thank the members of the board for taking comments last year and really taking those into consideration in these new proposed regulations as well. I'd just like to make a few quick comments, especially in general with USP 797, USP 800, USP standards around compounding. They have set a standard for us, and I appreciate the board's eagerness to extend those safety procedures even further. That being said, I'd like to just say that when it comes to evidence-based practice, which is what we are all trained to in the world of pharmacy, I'd like to respectfully urge the board to take that into consideration as we look at these proposed regulations. There are a lot of standards that the board has proposed which will put a negative impact on the individuals that are actually doing the work. In light of the recent challenges institutions have had with shortages of workforce and resources, we're putting an additional burden on our pharmacy technicians and pharmacists, and we're moving a little bit away from the progress that the pharmacy profession has made to get pharmacists at the bedside. In particular, the immediate use standard, 1736.1, which speaks to immediate use and the requirements. When we look in an institutional setting like ours, and we have pharmacists attending every code, every rapid response, requiring urgent critical medications when it's a life or death situation, we're asking them to document a significant amount of information just to get a compounded immediate use product to a patient. And I think the board really needs to consider that in terms of the practicality and reality of what pharmacists face on a day-to-day situation in an acute care healthcare setting. And that's something that I think we just have to keep in mind as we move forward the agenda for safety. Another comment regarding the standards that we did provide comments on is 1735.7 and 1736.11. Previously, the board had provided an exception or an exemption for acute care facilities in the current regulations, which is under 1735.3, which provides some exemptions for those facilities under Health and Safety Code 1250 from some of the exemptions of documentation of certain lot numbers, manufacturer, expiration date. As institutions, we still complete this requirement and we have processes in place. But when you have systems such as disasters or emergencies that are out of our control, it does put an undue burden on the staff on providing that safe care. And I'd really encourage the board to look at our existing regulations and maybe reconsider adding some of these exemptions back for some of these facilities that are using this exemption. Outside of that, I appreciate the opportunity to provide comment, appreciate the comments and support what Dr. Horn had mentioned around hazardous preparation, as well as some of the other comments that we've made. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Patel. Next we have, I believe it's Ala Han. I'm sorry if I mispronounced.
Could you hear me? Oh, perfect. Good morning. Thank you for, my name is Alan Ahn. I am from Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. And I would like to thank the board again for providing the opportunity to submit and verbally also comment on these proposed regulations. And also would like to thank the board for working with us, with the group here, with the proposed regulations to help improve patient safety for compounded medications. We've already submitted the comments in advance to the board, but also would like to highlight some verbally as well. Past few years, technology and automation has significantly improved again and provided many safety guards for our patients. Now, that being said, we wanted to kind of request the board to be considerate of these new technologies that's available when drafting these regulations. So, for example, specifically 1736.13, which is regarding the label requirement. We were hoping to ask the proposed regulations to be revised slightly to allow for the items of the component of the labels to be available on the EHR and to be available to be shown on the EHR instead of being just a simple paper form. In addition, I also would like to thank the previous speakers and would like to agree with them that there are significant financial impact of these additional regulations. Statistically, about 52% of the hospitals in California are losing money, and with all these additional regulations, it will worsen the financial impact and the burden on many institutions here in California. So specifically, 1737.13, which is requiring the plastic backed mats that's mandated. An estimate, burden for that specific requirement could range from hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on the volume of the sterile compounded chemo products that an institution may make. So, again, just wanted to highlight those two main concerns that I wanted to vocally share. And again, thank you very much for the opportunity to provide comments.
Thank you. Next, we have Monica Miller.
Good morning. Excuse me. Good morning, Madam Chair, and staff committee members. Monica Miller, representing the California Naturopathic Doctors Association. We did provide written comments prior to your June 3rd deadline, so I know that your staff has those. And we also want to thank your staff who have been helpful in terms of walking us through this process and where you guys are. So we appreciate that. However, we continue to have concerns with the board adopting these regulations at this time. We would strongly encourage the board to consider putting them into sunset review with the legislature. We think that it's appropriate, and I think you can see by both the amount of people you have through the WebEx as well as in this room, that there should be some more sunshine on this through the legislative process with legislators' input, as well as having community members being able to go and stakeholders and having conversations with the legislature. We just think that this is a really big step forward. It's going to adversely impact, if you do adopt these regulations, a number of our patients. We have grave concerns about that, and so we strongly encourage you to, again, push this over to sunset review within the legislative process. Thank you for your time today. We appreciate it, and we really hope that you'll take these comments into consideration.
Thank you. Next, we have Mark Johnston.
My name is Mark Johnston, and I've been a California licensed pharmacist for 33 years. Today, I represent CVS Health. USP 800 contains a broad carve-out for facilities that do not engage in hazardous drug compounding and thus only dispense hazardous drugs in manufactured dosage forms. However, proposed Article 4.7 does not contain such a carve-out. In our submitted written comments, we identify 6 sections of Article 4.7, which we believe should only pertain to compounding, as well as requesting changes to the required SOP to clarify that storage and filling of a prescription with manufactured hazardous drugs does not have to occur within a separate designated area. CVS Health believes the use of designated person within Article 4.7 should be optional and not mandatory, as a PIC should have the right to assume all designated person responsibilities themselves. Certainly, a PIC should be able to retain responsibility and accountability for the performance and operation of a pharmacy, including the responsibilities and accountabilities that relate to the handling of hazardous drugs. CVS Health develops policies at a corporate level and standardizes them across 1,000 California pharmacies for PICs to implement and assure adherence. At CVS Health, a corporate person or even a department is essentially the designated person, as the term is used in Article 4.7. At CVS Health, such a designated person is not approved by a PIC, and such a designated person is not responsible and accountable for the performance and operation of any pharmacy. Therefore, CVS's written comments request that the board vacate the view that oversight of hazardous drug compounding and handling is separate and distinct within each individual pharmacy. Last year, APHA, ASHP, and NABP convened a summit which called upon participants to implement various actionable solutions, including boards of pharmacy. Among other actions, the Implementing Solutions report tasked boards of pharmacy to identify unnecessary regulations and burdens and workplace requirements that take away from the activities that could improve the safety of patients and the well-being of pharmacy staff. CVS Health believes that maintaining employee lists, which may be subject to frequent change, and is an example of a burden that your own association has asked you not to promulgate. Also, CVS Health believes that a prohibition on the use of an unclassified pass-through may create risk of microbial contamination due to the additional movement throughout the ISO classified space. Therefore, we request that a pass-through into an unclassified space remain allowed. CVS believes that patients may become concerned about ingesting a drug that is termed hazardous, potentially discontinuing therapy. Therefore, we believe that counseling on hazardous drug disposal should be left to the professional judgment of the pharmacist, and we have again suggested changes within our written comments. Article 4.6, sterile compounding, does not account for the fact that people will introduce an acceptable amount of airborne particulate as determined by USP experts, and this is especially true in the ante room and the buffer room, ISO 7 and 8. According to USP 797, based upon scientific expert review, ISO 7 and 8 areas are expected to have a CFU count above 1 CFU. In the absence of specifying a particular ISO space in 1736.6, anytime more than 1 CFU of any microorganism is found, a microbiologist analysis of the organism is triggered, which will occur at great frequency and create unwarranted cost. Realizing this requirement doesn't apply anywhere else across the country, CVS Health has requested amendments which mimic USP Chapter 797 requirements for ISO 7 and 8 areas, but retain your more proposed, more stringent CFU count for ISO 5 areas. Lastly, CVS Health applauds the board for eliminating current Rule 1735.8C, which requires routine testing and analysis of compounded drug preparations, and replacing it with proposed 1735.11's requirement to comply with USP Chapter 1163, which allows the compounder to use their clinical discretion and professional judgment in determining the need for routine testing and analysis. Thank you for this additional opportunity to comment, and everything I mentioned today has been submitted in written form, and I'll send my testimony to the email address. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Grant Miller. I see you have two people. Are both of you going to be providing testimony?
We are, and we can't both be Grant Miller. I'm Dan Baxter. I'm the second person listed right under Dr. Miller.
Okay, Noreen, how should we do that? Can they go back to back 5 minutes each, or they're both on the list here as providing testimony?
Well, if they both signed up to provide comments, they have the opportunity to see. So I'm not sure why they came up together. If you're from the same organization,
We're from the same organization. Just figured we'd knock it out back to back and save some time.
Okay, is it okay if they I guess, not have 5 minutes and then 5 minutes, but if they share the 10 minutes, what's the appropriate? I mean, how are you going to?
We can each make our comments in 5 minutes.
That would be great.
Yeah, it'll be sequential.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
So first to speak is Grant Miller.
Actually, I'm going to go
Dan
first.
Baxter.
I'll go
Oh, you're
first.
going to defer to
Yeah.
each other. Okay.
Yeah. So thanks all. My name is Dan Baxter, and I'm the Executive Director of the California Veterinary Medical Association. It's nice to be here. I want to touch on 2 items here today. First, I want to convey the CVMA's appreciation for the modifications to the regulatory package under consideration today, and specifically the addition of relevant language to Subdivision A of Section 1735.1 and Subdivision C and D to Section 1736.1. The inclusion of the 7 and 28-day compounding supply authorizations for veterinarians addressed the concerns that the CVMA had previously expressed, and we are grateful that those concerns were taken into account in fashioning a going forward regulatory framework. And we specifically want to acknowledge the work of Chair Serpa in that regard, so thank you, Chair. My second point is unfortunately less positive and has to do with the reality of what veterinarians needing critical compounded medications are currently facing out in the field, and that reality is quite stark. Specifically, veterinarians in many instances are unable, either altogether or in a suitably timely fashion, to procure compounded medications for animal treatment. 3 examples of unavailable medications are 1, antifungal ophthalmic medications, ointments, essential for the treatment of ocular issues in horses and other animals. 2, thyrotropin releasing hormone, which is a critical diagnostic tool for a common equine disease. And 3, controlled substances for use as office stock. It should be noted that these 3 medications and others are unavailable in FDA-approved forms, either altogether or in a form that can be administered effectively to animals, leaving compounding as the only vehicle for those medications to be adequately procured. We've talked to representatives from the few veterinary compounding pharmacies left in California, and they report to us that their concerns over Board of Pharmacy enforcement is deterring them from providing several needed medications, including those I previously mentioned. So despite the fact that the law actually permits, it does and it would going forward under these regulations, compounding pharmacies to provide those medications to veterinary practitioners, they're unwilling to do so because of board enforcement authority and activity. As a result, California veterinarians are the only ones in the country to not have medications available to them to treat their patients, and California's animals are decidedly suffering for it. If Board of Pharmacy representatives wish to discuss the matter with the CVMA further, we would certainly welcome a meeting to do that, perhaps even including the Veterinary Medical Board in that session. Thank you, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Miller.
Thank you very much. My name is Grant Miller. I'm a veterinarian and the regulatory director at the California Veterinary Medical Association. I felt compelled today to come here to speak to you actually as a practitioner, and I thank my employer, Dan Baxter, to be here on behalf of the CVMA as the executive director. But I'd like to tell you a story about what it looks like out there for me as an equine practitioner. I'm going to stand up, I'm going to hand you this handout, and I'm also going to share the handout with the room. I'd like you to meet Mystique. As an equine practitioner, many of my patients spend the winter time in Southern California, usually in Indio or Thermal, and then they come up here for the winter time. This past winter, I came across Mystique and was pretty upset and shocked at what I saw that had occurred with her in the time that she was gone. The picture you see is Mystique before her ocular fungal infection. In September of 2023, Mystique began showing signs of a corneal ulcer in her left eye. The veterinarian treated it with normal course of treatments, including antibiotics and anti-inflammatories, but quickly realized that this was an atypical infection due to the lack of response to therapy and the aggressive nature of the progression. Fungal eye infections are rare in California horses due to the arid climate. They are characterized by multifocal punctate ulcers that rapidly progress through the cornea to colonize the stromal layers. The infection rapidly progresses through the layers and perforate Descemet's membrane, resulting in significant pain, anterior flare, uveitis, and blindness. So it's like a dirty bomb for eye infections in horses. Effective treatment can only be achieved by topical administration of antifungal ophthalmic ointments, and only if the infection is treated quickly. Systemic antifungals are ineffective against fungal ulcers in horses. At the time of Mystique's infection in September of 2023, ophthalmic preparations used to treat fungal keratitis in horses were not available in the state of California. They are miconazole, itraconazole, natamycin, and voriconazole. Of the few remaining veterinary compounding pharmacies in the state, none of them would compound the medication at the time. And today, only one compounding pharmacy offers an antifungal ophthalmic. It is itraconazole, and it has only recently just become available. It's only available pursuant to a patient-specific prescription, and for a variety of reasons, this can result in delays in treatment. For Mystique, the timing of this single drug becoming available was too little, too late. Her veterinarian tried to find antifungal medication in California and even searched out-of-state pharmacies. None of them would offer it because she practiced here in California. California is the only state in which veterinarians are reporting that they cannot obtain multiple medications to treat their patients. The owner had an antifungal medication shipped to Las Vegas. She then drove from her home in Indio to her family address in Las Vegas, picked up the medication, and drove it back into California. By then, Mystique was blind in her left eye. And there's Mystique now with her phantom ghost eye after not receiving treatment. Mystique will require special management for the remainder of her life. Setting aside the fact that she is now blind, her eye can become painful at times and requires special protection from the wind, dust, and bright light. She now wears a special UV protectant mask essentially at all times during daylight hours and often sometimes at night. Mystique spent 47 days in a hospital wearing a blackout mask with an indwelling subpalpebral lavage system that delivered medications such as serum, antibiotics, tissue plasminogen activase, and others, and to her eye every 2 to 3 hours on a 24-hour basis. Her hospitalization cost the owner $27,000. If the eye was treated with the topical antifungal medication, it could have been treated at home by the owner, administering medication 3 to 4 times daily for about a month. She would have made a complete recovery, and the overall cost would have been likely less than 1/10 of the cost of Mystique's hospitalization for her other treatments. The backside of this is a text message that I sent back and forth with the client last night. And I asked her, how much is Mystique worth? And she laughed and she said, before, when she had 2 eyes, she was worth $500,000. She is a Grand Prix Olympic jumping horse. Do you think you could sell her for that now? Oh no, I couldn't sell her at all now. She's a forever horse. Thankfully, she's a mare, so maybe I'll breed her one day. This is but one example of harm being done to animals all over the state as a result of this board's actions. And why do I say that? It's for the
15-second
following
warning.
simple reasons. There are no other states in the United States of America in which veterinarians are reporting they cannot obtain medications. And when we ask compounding pharmacies in California specifically why we cannot get them, it is not USP they point to. It's this board's regulations and enforcement activity.
5 minutes are up.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Next, we have Robert Jackson.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. My name is Robert Jackson, and I'm really here on behalf of a couple different entities, one of which is CSHP, Hospital Leadership Committee. We've submitted the comments, and I wanted to encourage the board to review those and consider them. I'm also here on behalf of my company, CPS Solutions, and we really manage small hospitals throughout the nation. And that's why I'm here today, because we are in a world where, there's a lot of large organizations. There's the Sutters, there's the Kaisers, the UCs, and they've got enormous resources. But I wanted to make sure that we here with the Board of Pharmacy don't forget about the little guys, the community hospital that services their local community. And so I'm here to talk about 3 of the regulations that are proposed that are really passionate to me and that I wanted to at least give a verbal comment on. The first is 1736.1 subsection B, which talks about the immediate use being loss of life or intense suffering being required for pharmacists to do immediate use. And I wanted to remind the board that the USP actually removed the emergent use requirement from 797 revision. And small hospitals don't have the resources of the large large organizations, they may have an SCA with a PEC in the corner, and that's all they've got. And if that PEC goes down, inevitably a motor breaks or the HEPA filter leaks or something like that, they can't do any sterile compounding for loss of life or intense suffering compounds. And they would have to outsource it. And many of these hospitals are an hour away. They'd have to get a contract with an outsourcer, and they just don't have that ability to do it. So what do? I will tell you what they do, because they call me and they ask me, what are we going to do, Rob? And that they decide to push it to nursing. And they give it to the nurse and they say, you compound it because I can't do it. And I'm not sure that that's really what we want to do. Now, don't get me wrong, nurses are awesome. But when it comes to making sterile compounds, pharmacists are the masters of awesomeness. And so I really would hope that the board would allow the pharmacist to make an immediate use compound, even when it's not for loss of life or intense suffering. Now, I understand that we don't want pharmacists compounding on the counter everything. I get it. I have over 60 hospitals throughout the United States, and in every other state besides California, they're doing that. They're making it on the counter, and it scares me, certainly. I don't want that either. But we need to make some allowance for the little guy to be able to make compounds when their PEC goes down, and not have to push it to nursing. I also wanted to mention 1736.4C1. That's the one about designated compounding area. The temperature shall typically be 68 or below in the designated compounding area. And Board Member Serpa, I wanted to mention that I appreciated your comments back in 2019 about using enforcement discretion with the shall typically be. But I don't know that we really need to have something like this. USP uses the language in the clean room suite. The temperature should be 68 or below, but the proposed regulation says designated compounding area, which presumably include a segregated compounding area. Now, remember, the SEA often is in the corner of a small little hospital pharmacy. They have no separate HVAC system. They can't control the temperature. And I wanted to mention that, BPC 4119.7B requires room temperature drugs to be kept at the proper storage. Room temperature is 68 to 77. So if they've got their PEC over there, they're supposed to do 68 and below, and they've got their drugs being stored right here at 68 to 77. That gives them 1 degree of compliance a window of compliance to do both. And so I would hope that you would at least consider changing it back from designated compounding area to clean room suite, or removing it completely to match what 797 says. The last one that I'm really passionate about is 1737.6A, and that's in regards to HD wipe sampling. I did want to
15-second warning.
There's no guidance or standards on what to do. We have no evidence on how to handle this. It's very costly for the small hospitals, and I would ask that you would consider removing it completely to match 800.
5 minutes or up.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next, we have Dr. Ann Haas, MD.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Ann Haas. I am the legislative chair for CalDerm. And not only does this involve assisting California dermatologists and their patients, but I'm here today also deputized by a number of our national sister organizations who have submitted paperwork for you to review. And they include the American Academy of Dermatology, the American Society for Dermatologic Surgery, the American College of Mohs Surgery, and the American Society for Mohs Surgery. Here is our ask. We are seeking language to allow a beyond use date of at least 12 hours and a repeal of language in Article 4.6 of 797 requiring patient-specific prescriptions, particularly for buffered lidocaine. This would enable buffered lidocaine to be made on the morning of the clinic day in advance of patients' visits, which allows that valuable time will not be taken away from patient interaction. In November of 2018, our sister organizations met with the USP, the FDA, and the CDC to discuss our concerns regarding buffered lidocaine. As I indicated, and Dr. Potoskin has as well, buffered lidocaine is routinely prepared in syringes in the morning of the patient's visits with a beyond use date of at least 12 hours to facilitate both patient access and patient comfort. The parties agree that carving out buffered lidocaine from USP 797 requirements and developing a separate monograph to enumerate an approved process for buffering lidocaine would meet the agency's safety concerns, maintain patient comfort and safety, reduce physicians' administrative burden, and ensure continued access. So, an independent laboratory completed a number of tests, which included antimicrobial effectiveness, package integrity evaluation, sterility tests, bacterial endotoxin tests, particulate matter in injections, pH tests, and stability over several study time points. The USP is currently in the process of finalizing the monograph, which will include the required evidence of safe aseptic practices sufficient to exempt in-office preparation of buffered lidocaine from the owner's requirements that limit dermatologists from providing their patients with necessary treatment. Because the board's proposal currently does not reflect the testing conducted as part of the monograph process, we urge you to refrain from adopting a regulation that would prohibit physician in-office preparation of compounding medications, as adopting any regulations at this juncture will critically impact dermatologic care. In fact, the Ohio Board of Pharmacy amended its immediate use regulations, allowing physicians to prepare buffered lidocaine 12 hours prior to administration in response to the evidence provided by our organizations and other stakeholders. Let me tell you a story. This happened yesterday in my office. I am a surgical dermatologist and the Mohs surgeon for Sutter Health here in Sacramento. Yesterday, I had a 44-year-old woman come into my office for removal of a biopsy-proven squamous cell carcinoma just next to the vulva in her genitalia. This had been biopsied by her OBGYN. OB does lots of wonderful work, but they don't do a lot of skin biopsies. Consequently, she had her biopsy done with straight lidocaine with epinephrine, no buffering at all. She came into the office shaking and terrified. She told me she almost canceled her appointment with me because she was so freaked out about how awful, painful her biopsy was, that to think about having the removal done in the office with local anesthesia just freaked her out. Her only other option would have been going to the operating room at considerable time and expense to have this done under general anesthesia. So we walked her through it. I used buffered anesthesia. We cleared her at one stage, got her repaired, and she was so grateful. She was in tears at the end of the procedure and gave me a big hug. And when her nurses told me why I wouldn't be calling her today because I was here defending buffered lidocaine, she turned to me and she said, "Would you go tell those people what my day was like, what this was like?" So on behalf of that patient yesterday, I just wanted to share her story. We got her through a procedure. It was done safely, effectively, spare her having to go to the operating room. This was not a one-off. This happens routinely in dermatology practices. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next, we have Dr. Rita Shane.
Good morning. Thank you. Rita Shane, Vice President, Chief Pharmacy Officer at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. I have been in practice for over 2 scores. And the reason I say that is that I've had the privilege of working with this board on tactics, strategies, and regulations to advance patient safety by leveraging pharmacists and technicians to support safe medication use. So with the regulations at hand, we've submitted comments, but I wanted to make some contextual comments because I think it's really critical as we look at the increasing acuity of patients in our hospitals, the baby boomers. I'm one of them, a number of which are incredibly ill. The staffing shortages that we're all experiencing. A national survey demonstrated that 84% of health systems have struggles trying to find technicians to do sterile compounding. Budget pressures continue. 52% of hospitals in the state of California are losing money, and the budget pressures are real on staffing, even at places like Cedars-Sinai, which people think are really well resourced. Whenever we add steps to processes, we impact patient care. And I know that the state board has been passionate about sterile compounding and has taken a leadership role for over 20 years because I've been involved in this for over 20 years. And I do believe that the goal is one that we all share. We cannot compromise the sterility of products that we provide for our patients. But that being said, USP 797, 800, 825, and the like have raised the bar and created a new standard of care. Also something the state board is very interested in. And those standards of care are intended to support the sterility and the appropriate handling and safety of our employees as well. And we have all adopted those, and that has increased the work for every organization across the country, including those of us that practice in California. The number of steps, the cost associated with just implementing the November requirements are not insignificant. They're at least $500,000 for an organization like our size. But I'm not here to talk about money. I'm here to talk about patient safety, because I have had the benefit of being involved in research, observing safety at my organization and in collaboration with colleagues. We cannot keep our patients safe if we're focused on process. We can't keep adding processes at the expense of looking at whether that order is even accurate. We have a phenomenon, I call it the polydoc, polypharmacy, polydisease in our patients. They are so sick they need multiple physicians taking care of them. They have multiple comorbidities, and their orders change all the time to take care of their underlying diseases and conditions. If we're focusing on all of the documentation, how can we make sure that that compound is actually safe and accurate? We all know that the wrong rate is the difference between someone getting better in the ICU or someone getting worse, or a cancer patient having an adverse event that could be significant, that could cause extravasation, or it's the wrong dose. We have to focus on patient safety, which is what this board has done so well. My concern is that in the desire to help clarify USP 797 and create some standard approaches to interpretation, we've unwittingly created lots and lots more steps. And so I would implore an evaluation of which of the additional regulations actually support patient safety versus adding steps that takes employees and leaders away from ensuring the safety of all of our patients in our health systems. We do not want to outsource to 503Bs. We can't find a 503B we trust. You know, years ago, my friends were all doing farm medium. I go, no, I'm not going there. And then it was the New England Compound Center. I go, no, I'm not going there. We do not want to push for outsourcing. We do not want to push for nurses to make immediate use drugs because the documentation requirements are high. The intent we share. Let's make sure we provide sterile products and protect our employees. But let's not do that by adding steps that are not based on evidence that we can't really ensure do not take the focus away from not only the sterility and the safety of the employees, but take us away from making sure that's the right drug for the right patient at the right time. So please reconsider. We provided our written comments, but patient safety is what we're all about. And this board has been instrumental in advancing practice. Let's not let the processes get in the way. And I would suggest that USP 797 and 800 are the standard of practice and should be considered in the standard of care that the board has actually advanced in a very positive way to leverage pharmacists.
15-second warning.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you can appreciate my passion. I've been in practice for well over 2 scores, and I do enjoy the opportunity to collaborate and hearings like this that enable us to communicate. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next, we have Dr. Marie Kottman.
So I can see. Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to address you today. I am Marie Kottman, and I've been the owner-operator at Pacific Compounding Pharmacy in Stockton for 18 years, and I have been its sole PIC. It is a full-service, compounding-only pharmacy. I opened my business in order to take care of patients, and I run my compounding lab so that I can sleep well at night, knowing that my patients are safe. We share these things. You want me to practice in a safe manner, and I want to keep my patients safe. I've participated in the rulemaking process several times in the last 2 decades, and I take very seriously the proposed regulations that are the subject of this hearing today. During the comment period, I read through the 85-page statement of reasons, and I reviewed the 42 pages of proposed regulations that exceed USP chapters 795, 797, and 800. And then I submitted my 35 pages of my own comments, rationales, and recommendations for your consideration. Thus, my comments today will be broad-based and not specific. I assume that you're reading my comments. As you're clearly aware, compliance with USP compounding chapters and the FDC Section 503A are already required by both BPC 4126.8 and federal law, respectively. Over a several-year process, diverse committees of experts developed the language in those compliance documents with input and feedback on a back-and-forth process from stakeholders who had an equally diverse set of interests. As Dr. Serpa outlined in the beginning of this hearing, there's been a 5-year process of reviewing and educating the board on the contents and impacts of federal law and the USP chapters. It's a long process. However, how many practicing experts in the field of compounding wrote the 42 pages of the proposed regulations that exceed the aforementioned committee's work? What scientific evidence was presented to our board committees to validate the proposed language that it will actually improve patient safety? Have your licensees expressed confusion about the requirements already in USP or the FDCA that warranted all this additional regulations for clarification? Ultimately, I'd like you to consider what problems in compounding are you trying to solve, and where is the evidence that these regulations proposed today will, in fact, solve those identified problems? This is a massive proposal to add new sections Title 16 Division 17 Article 4.5 to the California Code of Regulations, and it should not be adopted in one fell swoop. There are far too many issues within which could set California on a trajectory to significantly fewer compounding pharmacies, which will ultimately result in reduced access to compounded preparations for the public. The existing regulations are already, and you've heard this today, pushing sterile compounding into doctors' offices or possibly into the phlebotomist cars, where you have no oversight. How does that protect our public at all? I propose that you limit your current rulemaking action to simply rescinding the old compounding laws. BPC 4126.8 requires compliance with USP, which is already on the books, and no further immediate action is necessary at this time. Do not approve the proposed additional regulations, but instead form expert advisory committees to examine and address the real problems. Insist on evidence from both staff and the committees, which will demonstrate that the science that can improve public safety, and then restart the rulemaking process. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Can't read the last name, so you'll have to introduce yourself when you come up. Stephanie starts with an E. Edsley? Ensley, E-N-D. Okay, come on forward.
Green light. Hi. How's that? Wow. Hello, my name is Stephanie Ensley. I am a fire captain, EMT, and training officer with Goldridge Fire in Sonoma County, and I've been a firefighter and EMT for 15 years now. The board's action of pursuing the making of sterile compounded drugs illegal is not only distressing, but baffling to me, as I can see no reason for it. In the abstract, this is a subject that I would normally not get involved in, but it turns out that this affects me and my 35,000 California firefighting brothers and sisters personally. This personal reason is called cancer. The leading cause of death for firefighters is cancer due to the high exposure of carcinogens. In fact, 73%
of California line of duty deaths are due to cancer, compared to 22% for the general population. The majority of toxins, also aka carcinogens, that firefighters are exposed to and end up being absorbed and stored in our bodies as what have been referred to as forever toxins, meaning toxins building up that cannot be removed, basically is a cancer sentence. But there is hope. A year ago, I was part of a 16-week detox research study of firefighters, sponsored and funded through the Volunteer Fire Foundation. We were tested prior to, midway through, and at the end of the 16 weeks to track the efficacy of the detoxification treatment, which was based around a sterile compounded medication called glutathione via IV and nebulizer treatments. Out of the 59 toxins that I was screened for, 11 were shown to be in the red or higher than the 95th percentile, aka levels indicative of developing cancer prior to starting the glutathione treatment. Included were thallium. It's one of the most toxic heavy metals. And there were 3 agricultural pesticides and herbicides, DEDTP, which is an agricultural insecticide, DMTP, a neurotoxin found in pesticides, and glyphosate, also found in Roundup. These are coming from forest fires that we're fighting. Upon completion of the 16-week program, those 11 toxins that had been at such dire levels had dropped down to the 75th percentile or less, thus bringing my tox screen to reflect levels of a normal non-firefighting civilian. Side effects included the ability to breathe better and more deeply. My energy levels have increased, and my levels of inflammation in my joints have decreased significantly. Previously, I had doubts that I would be able to continue on, and yet now I find that I am way healthier and ready to keep going. All of my fellow firefighters participants had significant drops in their toxins as well. Our lab results reflect scientific proof that the IV and nebulized glutathione treatments can remove what has been previously known as forever toxins, and that being a firefighter did not have to result in a death sentence. Voting to make it illegal for doctors to prescribe and pharmacists to dispense this FDA Category 1 substance would make access to glutathione impossible. And this means over 35,000 firefighters, my brothers and sisters, would lose access to a proven substance that can significantly reduce the levels of toxins in their systems, of which they're there because they are putting their lives on the line. And the least that we can do is keep the access to glutathione a viable option to improve their odds of not dying of cancer. That is all I have.
Thank you for your comments. I might be pronouncing this wrong. Please correct me when you come forward. Chi Su.
My name is Chi Su. I'm the Director of Pharmacy at UCSF. I'm here on behalf of UCSF, University of California, San Francisco. I want to provide some comments to the board regarding the regulation proposals that were submitted or that were published. We have submitted comments already through writing, so I wouldn't go into the detail on the actual comments that were provided in each of the regulations. But I just want to say that the implementation of USP 795, 797, 800 this past November is a significant positive step that will elevate pharmacy practice to a higher level in care and standards. We fully support the board's duty to protect public safety. We understand these regulation updates are crucial to ensure the public are protected. Our concern is that the currently proposed regulation impose additional requirements beyond that of USP general chapters. This will create enforcing barriers providing patient care and limit pharmacies from delivering appropriate service to our patients and inevitably potentially harming our patients due to delayed care. We ask that the board consider adopting USB 795, 797, 800 as they are currently published. This approach will provide an opportunity for the board and the public to assess the true impact of the updated USP chapters before introducing further adoptions to current regulations. I just want to provide a quick example of a subsection in the current proposed text that potentially could cause a lot of problems for acute care pharmacies. For example, section 1735.1, where it noted that a drug product appear in ASHP and FDA shortage list database is an example where compounding can occur for essential copy. The ASHP and FDA drug shortage database is not always a timely source for detecting fluctuation in the drug supply chain. Drug supply shortages often impact community and hospital pharmacy before they are even reported in the ASHP FDA drug shortage. Okay, I'll continue. Shortage and allocation can also be very specific to the wholesaler rather than occurring on a national scale. Current regulations they stand could potentially prohibit pharmacy from compounding product in these instances, potentially causing delay in care. And I could give an example for heparin infusions, where a lot of times one particular concentration of heparin infusions are used in the large academic settings, and we're tied to one or two manufacturers providing these products. And oftentimes during winter season, when there are supply chain disruption due to severe weather, storms or whatnot, wholesaler might have interruption in supplies. And oftentimes, compounding pharmacy are able to compound a short supply to anticipate these shortages, to minimize changing to actual hospital practice that could have impact to a couple thousand of nurses on the way they practice. For example, changing a concentration from 1 unit to 2 units per ml could have significant impact on how they practice. But I just want to bring that example as a comment to this regulation. But I thank the board for the time to provide these comments. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to offer some comments here today. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And I have to apologize. I missed one person, and so I want to call her up now. She was supposed to be before Stephanie Ensley. I apologize. It's Christine Stefanos or Stefanos. So sorry, Ms. Stefanos.
It's okay. Hello. Can you guys hear me? My name is Christine Stefanos. I've been a compounding pharmacist for the last 15 years. I would like to thank the board for taking the time to hear the public comments with regards to the proposed regulations today. The recommendations I will be making have been submitted to the board in writing. My first comment is with regards to 1735.12, where the board states it should be notified within 72 hours of the facility's receipt of a complaint of a potential quality problem or the occurrence of an adverse drug event involving a CNSP. In the interest of maintaining compliance with this proposed language, I would recommend that the board consider clarifying if the 72 hours would be in terms of business hours. Thank you for this consideration. My second comment is with regards to section subdivision 1737.14b. When furnishing an anti-neoplastic HD a sufficient supply of gloves that meet the ASTM D6978 standard to allow for the appropriate administration, handling, and disposal of HD drugs by the patient or patient's agent shall be provided. Guidelines for administering HD drugs have generally applied to inpatient settings. As written, the proposed language would extend to hazardous compounded prescriptions dispensed to the patient or the patient's agent in an outpatient setting. If that is the intention of the board, then compounding pharmacies dispensing HD compounded medications would benefit from an example written by the board to define what a sufficient supply of gloves would be. My next comment is with regards to section subdivision 1736.1, where the proposed language states, in addition to prohibitions and requirements for compounding established in federal law, no CSP may be compounded that is made with a non-sterile component for which conventionally manufactured sterile component is available and appropriate for the intended CSP.
As a concerned citizen and a compounding pharmacist, I must respectfully express my disagreement with the proposed law mandating compounding with a conventionally manufactured component when it is available. While the intention of the board may be to increase safety by using a commercially available sterile product, it fails to account for the nuanced considerations regarding beyond use dates and the continuity of care for patients, which is needed for sterile compounds. Currently, with the stability study that our facility has invested in, we are able to offer patients atropine ophthalmic drops with a 60-day BUD at room temperature. After factoring in that testing takes at least 2 weeks, our patients can get a prescription that is stable at room temperature for 45 days. However, the proposed regulations, which would require compounding with sterile commercially available atropine, drops the beyond use date to 30 days at room temperature. After factoring in the 2 weeks that it takes to test, there's only 14 days left, which is a challenging barrier to overcome with patients and may lead to them using a product past its beyond use date. My last comment is with regards to section subdivision 1736.9, where the proposed language states, all API and excipient components used to compound a CSP shall be manufactured by an FDA-registered facility, be accompanied by a C of A, and be suitable for use in sterile pharmaceuticals. A C of A that includes the compendial name, grade of the material, and the applicable compendial designations on the COA must be received and evaluated prior to use. When the C of A is received from a supplier, it must provide the name, address of the manufacturer. API and excipient components provided with a C of A without this detail shall not be used in a CSP. As a compounding pharmacist, I understand that vetting chemical suppliers is of utmost importance to ensure the quality and safety of the final CFP that is delivered to patients. However, I would like to express that we have encountered challenges in obtaining the name and address of the manufacturer from several of our major chemical suppliers. Despite our efforts to request this information, these suppliers have been unable to provide this information as they hold it to be proprietary information. In light of the difficulties our facility has had in obtaining the manufacturer name and address from some suppliers, we have put SOPs in place which state that when an appropriate supplier that is able to provide the manufacturer name and address will be considered as a first-tier supplier over those that are not able to provide that information. This allows us to consider best practices while still being able to source materials from alternative secondary suppliers. I ask you to consider how this regulation might impact patients' access to CSPs, given that certain chemicals necessary for compounding are only available from suppliers that we have historically not been able to acquire manufacturer information from. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next, we have A. Vanustrand.
Morning. Can you hear me? Good morning. My name is Andrew Van Ostrand, and I'm Vice President of Policy at Hims & Hers Health. Thank you to the board for the important work that you do on behalf of Californians. Hims & Hers is a California-founded and based business and one of the largest direct-to-consumer telehealth pharmacy companies in the country. We serve 1.6 million patients with more customers in California than in any other state. Founded in 2017 and a publicly traded company since 2021, we're actively exploring expanding our pharmacy operations in California. Around 1 in 3 of the prescriptions our prescribing providers write is for a compounded product. We're a proud member of the Alliance for Pharmacy Compounding and support the written and verbal comments submitted by other APC members and the association themselves. I'll focus my comments on Article 4.5, Section 1735.1, subsection FB, appearing at the top of page 3. This states, quote, "In addition to requirements for compounding established in federal law, no CNSP shall be prepared that is essentially a copy of one or more commercially available drug products unless the compounding produces a clinically significant difference for the medical need of an individual patient as determined by 1, the prescribing practitioner, 2, the compounding pharmacist, and 3, the dispensing pharmacist." We read this to mean that the board wants to require 2 separate pharmacists to sign off on the clinical significance of a prescription written by a practitioner such as a doctor or NP. Not only would this move beyond federal law, this new process would move California beyond anything required by USP. The patient and operational impacts of a new process like this are hard to overstate. In many ways, such a process would upend the practice of medicine itself. The board would require 3 separate providers to determine the clinically significant difference of a CNSP. Pharmacists, in theory, would be able to overrule or delay the filling of a prescription written by a doctor. Pharmacists would be required to make a clinical determination for a patient and/or a patient record that they likely never saw or reviewed. These requirements would create significant risk and liability for pharmacists themselves and put patients at risk by shifting decisions related to their clinical needs from their doctor to a 3-person consensus-based approach. It's hard, frankly, to understand exactly how this would work operationally in a retail pharmacy, a hospital-based pharmacy, or a contract pharmacy serving multiple providers. For us at Hims & Hers, such a novel, only-in-the-country process would almost certainly delay the filling of medically necessary prescriptions and add meaningful new staffing, training, operational, and legal costs. I urge the board to consider the negative impacts and risks these proposals will create for California patients and providers. Thank you, and please, as always, let us know how we can help.
Thank you for your comments. Next we have Jacqueline Jorgensen.
To make sure I'm audible. Does that work for everyone? Okay, thank you. My name is Jackie Jorgensen. I'm the founder and executive director of the Volunteer Fire Foundation, and I will try to get through this without crying, but very few promises. I'm curious, do any of you know what it feels like to sweat poison? My hands are shaking. Talking about petrochemicals specifically. So when they push up and out through your skin, they cause a bubbling burn that feels like you've been branded with a hot cast iron pan. When this happened to me in 2019, I went to a naturopathic doctor because most MDs have zero professional training in environmental medicine. By some miracle, the doctor I saw had the ideal resume to diagnose and treat me. He was a former cancer researcher. He worked in a clinic that was contracted with Seattle Fire Department to test and treat their firefighters for chemical exposure. And he happens to have patients in both California and New York City. This doctor looked at my rash and he said, either you've been working in an oil refinery or you were in New York after 9/11. I used to live in New Jersey. My mom's friend, Conrad, her best friend, was a chaplain who ministered to the people toiling at Ground Zero, and he invited me to go there with them. Within a few years, Conrad, like many of the firefighters he helped, was dead from cancer. The result of my toxicology testing were worse than expected. My body contained 3 different petrochemicals in the red zone, the highest level. One was double the 95th percentile. Literally, the little black line went off the chart. Another sky-high chemical was perchlorate. Anyone know what that is? It's jet fuel. So here I was, 18 years after 9/11, a brand new mom, and a cancer diagnosis waiting to happen. Thank God my doctor had an ace up his sleeve. There was one option to treat me, and it was sterile compounded glutathione. I went through months of treatment. We had to go slow because there is no research, for obvious reasons, on detoxing a breastfeeding mother. There was a risk of contaminating my milk supply, and it was a risk that I weighed for an entire year, but my risk of cancer was so much greater that I had to make the difficult decision to proceed. A year later, there was no measurable trace of any of these chemicals in my body. Meanwhile, Sonoma County, my beloved home, was on fire. 4 firestorms have ripped through us in 4 years. God, I really thought I'd stop crying by now. As I was in treatment, there are lots of layers to this. As I was in treatment, I was also launching the Volunteer Fire Foundation. It's a largely FEMA-funded nonprofit devoted to supporting firefighters in Northern California, and it was inspired by the suffering that I witnessed New York firefighters endure in the aftermath of 9/11. We provide supplies, subsidized trainings, offer mental health resiliency support, etc. But from day one, our most popular programs have been those that provide health support, specifically chemical detox. For years, we've run wellness clinics, lung detox intensives, and the crown jewel, a groundbreaking doctor-led multi-month firefighter detoxification research study. Our partner physicians integrate a number of modalities into our wellness programs, but the beating heart of them all is IV and nebulized sterile compounded glutathione. I want you to understand that cancer is the leading cause of death for firefighters, as Stephanie mentioned. There are plenty of studies that prove that firefighters are saturated with dangerous chemicals, and ours is the only one that we can find, that we are aware of in the world, that is looking at how to get them out. In the first round of our study, we were able to reduce the number of 95th percentile red zone chemicals by 74% across all participants. The most prevalent chemical in that round was glyphosate Roundup. It's sprayed in the vineyards, tanks of it burned during our fires. The California Forest Service sprays it as fuel management. Many of our participants contained 2 to 3 times the 95th percentile of glyphosate, and we lowered this number in 16 weeks by 93%. Many of the firefighters who participated in this study were supposed to be here today. Thank you, Stephanie. I know a lot of them have been waiting, including chiefs that have funded this study.
15-second warning.
And an alert just went out that there's a new fire right next to my son's preschool. If we are not taking care of our firefighters, what are we doing? There's no science to justify taking this medication from them. Please.
5 minutes are up.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next, we have Tim Madden.
Good morning. Tim Madden, representing the California Society of Plastic Surgeons. Thank you for your opportunity to provide comments. We have also submitted a letter, so I won't go into super deep details as our letter goes into those. But we would like to align our comments with Dr. Haas and Dr. Potaskin, our colleagues in dermatology. We would greatly appreciate consideration of an allowance to allow us to buffer lidocaine up to 12 hours in advance. And as Dr. Potaskin outlined, we're just not aware of any studies or any data that provide any concerns for patient safety. And the benefits to the patients, as Dr. Potaskin outlined, is he very nicely offered the opportunity to have the test done on either arm, tells us that this is something that's important for our patients. We'd also like to ask for some consideration of tumescent local anesthesia and a similar type of an allowance for a number of plastic surgery procedures, including liposuction and breast reconstruction. It's commonly used. And once again, there are some benefits to the patient in terms of the procedure and their outcomes for using this. And once again, we're not aware of any studies or any data that would suggest there's any patient safety concerns. And as we look at the regulations, the challenges that they would propose for physicians performing procedures in offices would be a detriment to patients. So thank you for consideration, and always available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next, we have Aaron Michael. Great, thank you. Aaron Michael had no comments. Next, we have AJ Day.
Good morning. I'm here to express my gratitude and support for the California Board of Pharmacy's efforts to update the rules for compounding in the state. As a compounding pharmacist with over 17 years of experience, I appreciate the board's recognition of the importance and value of compounding for patients who need customized medications. I also commend the board for seeking to align the state rules with the federal standards established by the Drug Quality Security Act of 2013, which aim to ensure the quality and safety of compounded products, and the revised standards from the United States Pharmacopoeia, Chapter 795, 797, and 800. I hope that my input will be helpful for the board as it finalizes the rules and implements them in the best interest of public health. My comments today are focused on 3 provisions which are at odds with both California and federal law. 1735.7 C2 would require the compounding record to identify, beyond the requirements of USP 795, the manufacturer of each component. Similarly, Section 1736.9D would require, beyond the requirements of USP 797, the manufacturer to be identified for all API and excipients on the compounding record, and also the certificate of analysis for each component and sterile compounds. Manufacturer identifying information is proprietary, trade secret, protected from disclosure under both California and federal law. Under the California Public Records Act, California Governance Code Section 6250, California cannot release certain proprietary information, including corporate records and trade secrets related to food, drugs, and cosmetics. Corporate proprietary information, including trade secrets, is specifically exempt from disclosure by the state. Further, California Health and Safety Code precludes the state from revealing any information acquired concerning any method of process which, as a trade secret, is entitled to protection. The California Board of Pharmacy cannot compel regulated parties to disclose the very information that California law protects from disclosure. The California Board and other regulatory agencies always have access to the full information whenever they need it. There's no question that the federal government, specifically FDA, considers and understands this information to be trade secrets, protected as confidential commercial information, and treats it as such. In Form 483s and in warning letters that the FDA posts publicly on its website, FDA redacts the identity of the original manufacturer of components for use in compounding under the Federal Freedom of Information Act exemption B4, because it is, quote, confidential commercial information. Specific citations of FDA redacting this confidential commercial information are provided in written statements from the National Community Pharmacists Association. The proposed rules, which would require disclosure of the original manufacturer of compounded components, references the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act to support the proposed changes, yet the FDCA contains no such manufacturer disclosure requirements, nor do any non-binding guidance documents from the FDA. FDCA requires that bulk drug substances be accompanied by a valid certificate of analysis, and FDA accepts suppliers providing their own C of A's, which incorporates data from the original manufacturer's C of A with results from the supplier's own testing without disclosure of the manufacturer identity. Indeed, for the supplier, the identity of the original manufacturer of API and excipients represents confidential commercial information. Additionally, 1736.9D requires all excipient components to be manufactured by an FDA-registered facility. However, FDA does not require registration for excipient manufacturers, and therefore those manufacturers generally do not register. If the board moves forward with the proposal, there will be no excipients to use. Lastly, 1736.9E denies patient access to vital medications, including glutathione. By eliminating access to FDA's official interim policy while the agency finalized the 503A bulk drug substances list, which is published in the Federal Register and represents the agency's official stance on the topic, California would impose significant restrictions on medications without providing any evidence to support such action. FDA's purpose with the interim policy is to avoid interruptions to patient care, and that is precisely what will happen if California proceeds with this proposed rule. Within the interim policy, FDA has the ability to prevent access to API or restrict routes of administration when they have concerns about safety or efficacy, and they have done so in several instances. The proposed rule completely ignores the interim policy and is therefore inconsistent with federal law and official FDA policy. It is arbitrary and will put the health of patients who rely on these medications at risk. On October 8, 2023, Governor Gavin Newsom vetoed Assembly Bill 782. In his letter, Governor Newsom stated, quote, "This bill also contradicts AB 973, which I signed in 2019, which requires both sterile and non-sterile compounding in California to be consistent with the United States Pharmacopoeia guidelines. This bill would make exceptions to federal guidelines, which would pose a risk to consumers. For these reasons, I cannot sign this bill," end quote. The requirements to disclose original manufacturer identification,
15 seconds.
utilize excipients from manufacturers that register with the FDA, and ignore official FDA guidelines on bulk drug substances are all contradictory to USP and FDA guidelines. Many of the updates in the proposed rules for non-sterile, sterile, and hazardous drug compounding are much needed, and these 3 items are
5 minutes are up.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next, we have Eric Clausen.
Hi, thank you. My name is Eric Clausen. I'm a California licensed pharmacist and former compounding pharmacy owner. I've been practicing compounding pharmacist for roughly 15 years. Back in 2021, as I surveyed the compounding regulatory landscape, I was becoming more concerned about my ability to remain compliant with, at the time, was proposed USP changes as well as GFI 256, as I was doing a lot of veterinary compounding. Even before these draft regs that we're talking about today, the cost of compliance was becoming so significant that I didn't really see a clear path forward. As a small independent operator, I looked at the state of the industry, and like many others, I decided to get out of ownership. I sold the pharmacy that I worked so hard to build. My story is not unique. I know dozens of other independent pharmacists in the state that have made similar decisions. Some had no option to sell and just closed their doors. Last year, the buyer of my pharmacy made the similar decision and sadly closed the doors of my former pharmacy forever. I tell this, I tell this story because in the initial statement of reasons, the board stated in print that there would be no economic impact directly affecting businesses in California, and that initial determination is based on the absence of testimony to that effect during the public discussion and development of the proposed regulations. I actually had to read that last sentence twice to make sure I read it correctly. I've sat in these hearing rooms for the last 10 plus years and heard compounding pharmacists after compounding pharmacists try to explain what these regulations and prior regulations will do to our practice and our patients. The costs we would be forced to bear, the rising prescription costs of our patients would be forced to pay, and the decrease in compounding access. It appears many of our concerns have not been heard to date. I assure you there will be an economic impact from these proposed regulations, as has been outlined by many of the speakers today. There will be an impact to our patients. That impact may be economic in the form of higher prices, or it may be of declining access as more pharmacies close. I don't know. It appears that you also don't know based on the initial statement of reasons. And based on this testimony today, there may be many other areas of unintended consequences resulting from these regulations. More needs to be done to consider the many implications this will have on providers, on pharmacies, and on patients that rely on compounded medications. I strongly urge the board to consider delaying these regulations to officially retire the old regs and adopt USP. And if there is a desire to move these regs forward, actually and truly engage stakeholders, as Dr. Kottman recommended, to fully understand the impact of these proposed regs would have on the practice of compounding pharmacy, or consider moving the rulemaking process to the sunset review. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Next, we have Paul Lofholm.
Good morning. My pleasure to have a chance to interact with you today. I'm Paul Lofholm. I'm a practicing pharmacist, been licensed by the board for 60 years, been in the compounding field for that similar length of time. I served on the USP compounding committee, the original one in 1995, and so have some understanding also of USP regulations. The profession has come a long way. And the board at this moment is being challenged about new regulations that have come before the USP. I'd like to ask for clarification, for example, on the question of sterility methods. You all have noted 3 sterility methods in your proceedings. I'd like you to also consider irradiation, particularly for powders, because they are not covered under anything that I saw in your proposed regulation. It's also come to my attention that you're quoting as law or proposed law to include sections in the USP which are over 1,000. That means that they are guidelines and they are not mandatory. I would ask you to review those to see if they in fact are necessary for your deliberations today. I would prefer that they still remain as guidelines and not official proposals for the California board to act on. I have generally read all of your recommendations, most of which I agree upon. There's no doubt about that. It will improve the quality of the practice of compounding in California. We will, however, have set the bar fairly high, in fact, perhaps the highest in the country, and that may have some repercussions for access, as has been already explained here today. I'm also observing that the change in the board from when this issue first came up, that is back in, let's say, 1990 to today, that there's been a general change in supporting USP, whereas that wasn't always the case prior to that time. I commend you for taking on that challenge. You've done a huge amount of work. There probably still is a lot of work to do, and I am certainly prepared to assist you in any way I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lawfong. Next, we have Sean Kim. Thank you. Mr. Kim states that he has no additional comments. They have submitted a written comment. Next, we have Andre Peters.
Good morning. I'm providing comments regarding the proposed compounding regulations representing Scripps Health, a San Diego-based health system with more than 20,000 employees and physicians caring for patients. Additionally, I also represent the California Society of Health System Pharmacists, CSHP, where I serve as the chair of the Government Affairs Committee. We join others who have pointed out significant problems with the proposed regulations. The proposed regulations will increase the cost of caring for patients both directly and indirectly. It will prevent access to medical services, increase wait times for very sick patients, and in many cases leave healthcare staff without the ability to provide and administer medications to patients. The USP committee that came up with the new standards have taken a thoughtful, evidence-based approach that strikes a balance between cost and benefit, and these standards are now national standards, followed by all health systems and healthcare settings both in the USA and also worldwide. The proposed California regulations will add to the existing standards. It lacks evidence and it will prevent access to life-saving drugs and services. We would further like to give attention to the fact that the proposed regulations are duplicative and resource intensive. The cost impact will be debilitating for pharmacies and hospitals. We would like to refer to our cost impact analysis that was added to our comments for the purpose of this public meeting. I want to give some highlights. Proposed 1736(1)B regarding immediate use can cost a hospital $1.5 million each time an engineering control presents a challenge. Proposed 1736.1E regarding drug shortages will cost a hospital $120,000 to over $1 million per year. Proposed 1736.17 regarding transferring and documentation of items in the anteroom and PEC will cause pharmacies to double staffing to take care of this rule alone, which will cost $200,000 to over $1 million per year. For hazardous drug compounding, the following costs will be incurred. Wipe sampling will be $6,000 per biological safety cabinet per year. Sterile gloves, $40,000 per biological safety cabinet per year. Excuse me. Gloves for patients, $18,000 per year. Sterile disposable preparation mats, $52,000 per biological safety cabinet per year. Just highlighting a few of the direct and indirect costs above refutes the assertion that the board anticipates minimal ongoing costs to pharmacies. The economic impact of this proposal has a high likelihood to eliminate existing businesses such as pharmacies and hospitals and jobs within California. It will negatively impact the health and welfare of California residents by reducing the number of pharmacies and hospitals, where patients can seek care. By requiring that additional supplies be used, that does not improve safety but increase costs. The only parties that will benefit will be vendors of supplies. Additionally, an increase in usage of disposable materials containing trace chemo drugs will have a negative impact on the state's environment. Excuse me. Due to the potential impact and unintended consequences of these regulations on the health and welfare of Californians, businesses, workers, pharmacies, and hospitals in California, we propose that the board withdraw the proposed regulations. We submit that the minimum standards required by USP are adequate in achieving the goal of the protection of the public and serve as a reasonable alternative to the proposed regulation. We thank the board for welcoming comments from the public and would also implore the board to hear us in our great concerns regarding these regulations. Since 5 minutes is not enough for me to cover sufficiently all our concerns, I would submit the rest of our concerns in writing. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Peters. I believe we've received all comments from people in Sacramento. And in light of the time, I think that we should take a 15-minute break before we commence with WebEx comments. So let's take a 15-minute break. Thank you, everyone. We're going to come back together. We've already received comments for all individuals in Sacramento. Moderator, we're ready for comments for individuals participating via WebEx. As a reminder, the board respectfully requests, but does not require, that persons who make oral comments during the hearing today also submit a written copy of their testimony via email. The email for submission will be on the screen, and it's pharmacyrulemaking@dca.ca.gov. Okay, Tricia, we're ready for WebEx comments.
Thank you so much. I've opened the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment, please either raise your hand or type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. It is not necessary to do both. You may raise your hand or type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. And just a reminder, the Q&A panel is not meant as a place for you to type out questions, only to indicate that you have a comment to make. And with that, we'll start. Crystal Frost is our first. I'm just taking people in the order that they indicated they'd like to make a comment. And we have Crystal Frost first. Crystal, you should see a prompt to unmute yourself. Go ahead and do that. There you go. You're unmuted.
Hi. Okay, I'm Dr. Crystal Frost, PhD, and I'm a patient based in Los Angeles, California. I want to thank the board for this opportunity to speak today. I'd like to protect many freedoms of compounding pharmacies, but because time's limited, I'd like to defend patient access, specifically to intravenous glutathione treatments, which the board has proposed banning. As Ms. Stephanie Ensley and others were sharing earlier with regard to the firefighter community, there are many high-risk communities who suffer from illnesses relating to toxicity, who have had the quality of life restored by life-saving intravenous glutathione. So much so that integrative medicine practices all over the world began incorporating it into their practices. In my case, IV glutathione saved my life in 2021 and 2022 when I acquired severe mold toxicity or mycotoxicity while also battling neuroborreliosis or neurological Lyme disease. My detox pathways were so impaired that I also wasn't detoxing heavy metals and tested positive for obscenely high levels of thallium and literally off the charts levels of gadolinium, which is the heavy metal used to make MRI contrast, of which I had received several during the diagnostic period of my illness. As a healthy fitness guru who only ate organic, my atypical illness could not be attributed to lifestyle choices. Commercially available treatments were failing, and I had no choice but to quit working. A 30-year-old newlywed, I'd dropped to 98 pounds and exhibited symptoms of Alzheimer's disease, such as forgetting my own phone number and forgetting my own friends' names. I could barely walk, and I began experiencing fevers and anaphylaxis every single day because the toxic burden was simply too high. My husband and I came to realize this could take my life. Immune modulators proved useless because this complex illness had already effectively destroyed my immune system. Antifungals were useless because mycotoxins were what were making me sick, not mold spores themselves. Long story short, I finally saw an integrative medical doctor who advised me to try IV glutathione, explaining that our bodies produce this master antioxidant on our own, but I would not be able to produce nearly enough of it to save myself. So I began weekly, sometimes twice weekly infusions, and the relief was noticeable within the first couple months, but only got better. Within roughly 6 months, I was no longer experiencing fevers or anaphylaxis. I had been unable to walk more than 2 blocks and could now walk 2 miles again. I still get glutathione IVs for maintenance because my detox pathways are still impaired. You may argue patients can just take glutathione orally, but this antioxidant is notoriously difficult to absorb orally. Trust me, I tried. It would have been cheaper than doing IVs. Glutathione also has anti-inflammatory processes that provide natural pain relief, making the detox process less burdensome and making pain medicine much less necessary, at least in my case. Intravenous glutathione has proved itself life-saving for many with impaired detox pathways who need to clear dangerous toxins from their bodies. This applies to people with mold toxicity, heavy metal toxicity, and chronic bacterial infections like Lyme disease, where dead toxic bacteria need to be eliminated from the body. Preventing patient access to IV glutathione would effectively ruin and end many lives. Glutathione is so effective for so many that banning it is actually suggestive of an ulterior motive to prevent patients from being less dependent on drug therapy. Please, please reconsider. Many lives depend on it. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak today.
All right, the next request for comment is from Scott Guess. Scott, one moment, you'll see a prompt to unmute yourself, and when you see that prompt, go ahead and click on it. All right, it looks like Scott Guess has signed out, so we'll move on to the next person, and that would be Christina Chu. So Christina, if you see a prompt to unmute, go ahead and click on it. And Christina, you are unmuted.
I'm a pharmacy supervisor at Santa Clara Valley Healthcare, overseeing non-sterile compounding at 16 outpatient pharmacies across Santa Clara County. And I would like to bring up 2 subdivisions under Article 4.5, non-sterile compounding, of the pending regulations that our institution is requesting modifications be considered. The first subdivision, 1735.5, Cleaning and Sanitizing Subdivision A, states the facility's documentation of each occurrence of the cleaning and sanitizing of the compounding area shall include the identity of the person completing the cleaning and sanitizing, as well as the product names of the cleaning and sanitizing agents used. At the County of Santa Clara outpatient pharmacies, a non-pharmacy staff member in our environmental services team provides the daily cleaning for the pharmacy, including non-sterile compounding area. Keeping track of each non-pharmacy staff member will be burdensome and does not add value, since the pharmacy staff cleans and sanitizes the work surfaces before each compound. We're requesting to modify the requirement to state the facility's documentation of the cleaning and sanitizing of the compounding area prior to the compounding shall, so that our pharmacy staff can document their cleaning and sanitizing process and not rely on documenting non-pharmacy personnel actions that impact non-sterile compounding. The second subdivision, 1735.7, Master Formulation and Compounding Records, C1, states that the compounding record shall include the date and time of compounding, which is the time when the compounding of the CNSP started, and which determines when the assigned BUD starts. Assigning the BUD based on start time is unnecessarily stringent and wasteful. At the start of compounding, the product has not been fully made yet. USB 795 does not require the BUD to include time, so we are wasting hours that patients could have used compounded products for by calculating the BUD with time. Our recommendation is to keep the BUD based on the date for clarity to the patient, as patients are not used to having to consider the hour that a product may be used until, which may lead to patient safety concerns. Thank you for your time in considering these 2 modifications.
All right, the next request for comment is from Anissa Seja. And Anissa, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Good morning. Hi, sorry about that. Good morning. My name is Dr. Anissa Seja, and I am a resident at a small clinic here in La Quinta. And even in my few years in practice, I have seen the benefit that sterile compounds have had for patients. And I think that some of these regulations, the clinic I'm working with, we worked really hard to develop SOPs and to be compliant with USP, with the new regulations. And it has, it's something that we care deeply about because, like you all, we want to keep patient safety as a top priority. But it is a lot smaller for small clinics to think of having a pharmacist on staff when there's already so many regulations and costs to the clinics. And I, like a lot of these people here, are saying it would be a detriment to our patients who I see get a lot of benefit from things like IV glutathione. I am also myself a cancer survivor, which is kind of what brought me into naturopathic medicine, because I had such a positive experience using IVs and other natural medicines during and after my chemo treatment. I actually was not introduced to IV glutathione until medical school, when I was really burnt out and still depleted from some of the heavy chemo drugs that I had used during treatment. And it really did change my life. It changed my energy. Like a lot of these other people here, I saw decreases in the toxicants in my blood, and you can feel it just in your mental clarity. And so I'm speaking both as a doctor and as a patient who has had experience using these sterile compounds in clinical practice and as a patient myself. And so I just really would like to make a plea that we consider keeping these sterile compounds accessible for people to use. There's been, to my knowledge, not very many there hasn't been any studies that show any negative use of these. They're all pretty safe and well tolerated for the most part. And so I don't see why we would not allow people to continue to have access to this really powerful medicine. And I thank you for your efforts and for your time.
All right, the next comment is from calling user 23. Calling user 23, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, my name is Casey Hirsch. Professionally, I am a licensed clinical medical social worker, so I hear from patients often. Am I still going?
Yes, you are.
Okay. So I'm a licensed medical clinical social worker, so I hear from patients often. It's also my job to give patients a voice. But on a day-to-day basis, I'm a patient who suffers from an autoimmune disease called Crohn's disease. Listening to the testimonies, it's apparent to me that those opposing the use of sterile compounds are focused on money and inconvenience. In terms of safety, I've been a consumer of sterile compounds for over 20 years. And as a patient, I have never been subjected to any dangers, contamination, or infection as a result. However, I must note that numerous times conventional pharmaceuticals have placed my life in grave danger. First, I encourage the board to give patients a voice. We are an underrepresented population because our voices have been silenced by the perceived power of big pharma, conventional physicians, and corporate medical facilities. My life and survival with a disease that millions of Americans live with is contingent on my ability to obtain sterile compounds such as glutathione, B12. My body, like so many, cannot absorb nutrition nor process nutrition in the normal ways. I depend on B12 injections, IV therapies to give me the best chance I have at staying alive. These past years, I've been restricted from receiving certain compounded life-saving medications and from being even able to get intramuscular shots that I require for my longevity. Access to sterile compounds has not only kept me alive, but has prevented me from being hospitalized. I don't want to be hospitalized. I want to stay in the comforts of my own home and be cared for by my team of integrated physicians who know my body and needs best. Not to mention, access to sterile compounds has always been more affordable to me, despite my insurance not covering them. Am I still having to pay out of pocket? I urge the board to use my testimony as a voice for all patients who are too sick to attend, too tired and defeated to attend, and too oppressed to believe that we actually have a say as to what we put into our bodies and have access to. On behalf of sick and suffering patients like myself, I urge the board to help us retain the right to make decisions and have access to sterile compounds that significantly improve our quality of lives. If we lose this right, then our life quality deteriorates, and in my case, I might die. Thank you.
All right, our next request for comment is from Casey Hirsch. And Casey, you should see a prompt to unmute yourself.
That was just me. I already went, so that's a duplicate. So.
Oh, sorry. Okay, yes, of course.
No problem.
All right, next comment is from Chris Van Leeuwen. And Chris, you should see a prompt to unmute yourself.
Verify, would it be possible after my time is up to pass it over to Amanda Newhall, another firefighter who would like to speak publicly?
Is she logged in or is she in the room with you?
She's in the room with me.
I see no problem with that. I'll just start the timer for her when you switch over to her.
Okay, thank you. I'm ready. Good morning. My name is Chris Van Leeuwen. I've been a firefighter for 23 years. I eat healthy, I eat organic, I don't smoke, I don't drink alcohol. And up until 2021, I was a competitive triathlete. I take every precaution I can at work to limit my exposure to toxins, and I participate in regular physical exams. Yet in 2021, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor. It was around that same time that I learned approximately 10% of my colleagues had also been diagnosed with various types of cancer. As I speak to you now, cancer is still the leading cause of death in firefighters in the United States, accounting for 66% of all firefighter deaths between 2002 and 2019. Cancer detection and prevention through engineering controls are not enough. Blood tests and imaging only tell us if we have cancer or not. In 2022, following radiation treatment, I underwent toxicology screening. The numbers that came back made it very clear as to why I was susceptible to cancer. Without getting into the specific toxins that were present, I can tell you that if a value of 400 was the highest on the range of unsafe exposure, my values ranged from 800 to 1600 depending on the toxin. So it wasn't a question of if I get cancer, it's when will I get cancer. Luckily, the same doctors who did my testing and analyzed my results had something to offer, and it was glutathione. I was immediately put into a 6-week treatment protocol of weekly glutathione infusions. And my follow-up toxicology screening showed that my levels had dropped on average of 50%. 6 months later, my second test following additional treatment revealed that my toxin levels were well into the acceptable range and in some cases were no longer present. Firefighters put their lives on the line every day to protect their communities. We understand and embrace the possibility that we might die to save others. However, we don't seek death, and all we want is to live happily with our families and walk out of the fire station one last time after a long career in good health with our golden years ahead of us. It is my opinion, based on my experience and those of a few others, that glutathione could be the one thing that helps us achieve that goal of staving off cancer. As I sit here, I find myself baffled. Why is it that a substance that is a naturally occurring antioxidant with no safety and efficacy issues at risk of being banned? A substance that has helped so many cancer patients get through chemotherapy, a substance that has shown promising results in children with autism, and a substance that is giving firefighters a chance to remove the very things that lead to cancer being banned in all places, California. Now, I may not have the letters following my name or the degrees hanging on the wall that qualify me to answer those questions. However, as a firefighter, I can tell you with certainty that by making glutathione unavailable, you are literally taking a potentially life-preserving treatment from those who pledged an oath to put their lives on the line for you. So I ask you, please do the right thing. Thank you, and at this point, I'll turn it over to Amanda Newhall.
Thank you for letting me speak today. My name is Amanda Newhall. I'm a full-time fire engineer, which just means I'm the one that pumps and drives the fire engine in addition to firefighting. I work in Northern California, and I've been a firefighter for 16 years. I'm also the International Association for Firefighters Local 2604 president. I'm the peer support and health and wellness coordinator for our department, and I'm also the safety officer for administration. I first experienced glutathione via a nebulized treatment through an entity called First Responder Resiliency, Inc. This was training that helped me understand the health and wellness of my fellow firefighters and hopefully, give us tools to have in our toolbox to help us. I experienced a very productive cough after the treatment where I was actually coughing up sputum. My energy levels were much better. My labs improved. It didn't take long for me to be on board with this. The research you've heard is kind of out of this world. My boyfriend and his results, who you just heard from, were the part where when my boyfriend got his results for his brain tumor and decided to move forward with testing and revealing all of the toxins in his body, that was kind of an eye-opener for me. And since then, I've moved to host clinics throughout my county. There's other departments that are, funding glutathione treatment, and I hope they're here today. But these preventative cares for us to take care of cancer before it's cancer are not available to us. They're out-of-pocket expenses that we're happy to make. But when we ask for things like chest x-rays and, diagnostics ahead of it, they're not available. Just a glimpse into my world as a firefighter. There's so many different toxins, but on a given day, heavy metals from structure fires, which civilians experience during the tubs, wildland asbestos, investigations for just our prevention folks in the decay state of fires are getting exposed. Mold from just medical aid houses we're going into, cyanide, diesel, hazmats for our hazmat teams. We try to do our part. We wear our SCBAs, which are self-contained breathing apparatuses. We keep our equipment clean. We decon our gear. We're creating things like the firefighter cancer cohort study, and we're working on the labor, side of things in conjunction with management to make these things happen. There's entities such as NFPA that have become the national standard for our operations and our day-to-day. They have NFPA 1582, which is the physical and wellness program for firefighters. The recommendation for a physical exam asking for chest x-rays, PET scans, CT scans, and we're not getting them. Firefighting has become an occupation that is a group 1 classification for carcinogens, and that is backed by the IARC, the CDC, and NIOSH. 66% of line of duty deaths for firefighters is cancer related. We've even gone so far in legislation to have presumptions created in Government Code 31720.6. CPF has been working, that's California Professional Firefighters, to get AB 700 Firefighter Cancer Prevention and Research, AB 621 Public Safety Line of Duty Death Benefits. But I have to tell you, until you're looking at your fellow firefighter and your significant other who has a brain tumor and all of these toxins in his blood, I don't want a line of duty benefit. That's about the least.
15-second warning.
Okay. So health and wellness go hand in hand. Imagine putting yourself on the line and then getting a cancer diagnosis. This can lead to harmful thoughts, and suicide is prevalent too. So
I'm sorry, 5 minutes are up. Next, we have a comment from Daniel Kudrashov. And Daniel, you should see a prompt to unmute yourself. There you go. Daniel, you're unmuted.
Thank you. Just checking. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that. So my name is Daniel Kudryshov. Thank you for pronouncing the last name. I'm representing Keck Medical Center of USC, and I am a licensed pharmacist. I'm the medication safety officer for the medical center. We had actually submitted some written comments prior to the June 3rd deadline, but I wanted to call in as well and speak to just a couple elements which I wanted to highlight. The first one being element or proposed section 1737 5C, which talks about pass-through windows from the negative pressure, so hazardous drug clean room, to an unclassified space. Namely, with the concern I have with this section is that this is a new regulation. This would be a new regulation for pharmacies, because this has not been a standard or required standard in USP 797 or USP 800. So many existing clean rooms that are currently, in being used for sterile compounding of HDs in the state of California may have this feature in place. And as you all know, building a clean room is very, very expensive, and it takes several years of planning. And this is not something that could be changed within, a flip of a switch, given the exuberant costs involved and time necessary. So I would consider, or I would urge the board to consider giving or considering a grandfathering clause for pass-through windows from negative pressure clean room to unclassified space for construction that is already that has been in place prior to the enactment of that section. I'm not aware of evidence that shows the negative impact of such structures, and it would just seem that passing the language as is, completely prohibiting pass-through windows from the clean room, HD clean room to unclassified space, would cause extreme financial hardships on health system pharmacies and will likely lead to some closures, delays, and other negative impacts, which will definitely impact patient care in a negative way. The other section I would like to touch upon is 1736.1b, which talks about the requirements for immediate use compounding. And I would like to echo some of the comments made previously, where this immediate use compounding for sterile compounds primarily happens in a code blue situation where someone is in cardiac arrest and there's a team trying to resuscitate the patients, and the pharmacists are at bedside preparing a drip, maybe a vasopressor, to revive this patient. I'll tell you, that is not the time to document the elements that the Board of Pharmacy would require in the proposed draft elements. The draft regulations. I don't personally, in kind of looking at the regulations, we don't really see a benefit of documenting, the quantity of drips that was prepared for immediate use, and it just, the benefit is not there, but the negative impact will certainly be there, where the mind of the pharmacist needs to be focused on compounding, on taking care of the patient at that moment. And this particular regulation would certainly have a devastating effect on the role of pharmacists in that setting. So I'd like to just draw your attention to that. Additionally, I second some of the comments made about pharmacies that have very limited options for compounding, such as only a SCA or maybe a single clean room, and things happen when it goes down. What is the hospital to do? What is the pharmacy to do in the short term while sort of longer term plans are being launched? Having the ability to do immediate use compounding outside of just the restriction of life-threatening situation is certainly beneficial to the public, and I think it would be in the benefit of patient safety, and I would implore the board to consider that impact. I'll go on since I have some time. I'll talk about 1737.
15-second warning.
Okay. The last one is the environmental wipe sampling. Since it is not required currently by USP 800, I would urge the board to adopt the evidence-based recommendation by USP 800 on the topic of
And
environmental
5 minutes
sampling.
are up. All right, our next request for comment is from Diane Prispiorski. Diane, you should be able to unmute yourself. And Diane, you're muted. We can hear you.
Good morning. This is Diane Shaputisky with the California Orthopedic Association. Appreciate the opportunity to make comments at this hearing today. We are joining the other medical specialties that spoke and provided testimony this morning and requesting an exemption for compounded lidocaine. Just as in dermatology and plastic surgery, orthopedic surgeons do use a mixture of lidocaine and corticosteroid medicines for joint injections. It is not only less painful for patients, but does also provide a measure of a diagnostic benefit for the surgeon. They can more precisely see where the pain is coming from. And this is really essential for good patient care. So again, we are requesting an exemption for compounded lidocaine, and we have also submitted written comments. Thank you very much.
All right, our next request for comment is from Dr. Virginia Osborne. And Dr. Osborne, you should be able to unmute. All right, Dr. Osborne, we will come back to you. Our next request for comment is from Kinil Shah. Kinil Shah, you should be able to unmute.
Hi, thank you for giving me opportunity to talk on behalf of Santa Clara Valley Healthcare. We want to just mention, we have submitted written comments, but one of the section we wanted to point out is section 1736.2D. It states to not allow compounding personnel to compound if the compounder fails any aspect of the aseptic manipulation, ongoing training, and competency evaluation. This is stricter than our updated USP 797 language. USP 797 states someone fails testing, then results of evaluation and corrective actions documented, and the documentation maintained to provide a record and long-term assessment of personal competency. USP 797 does not have requirement to stop compounding due to the test failure. This proposed language is too restrictive, especially for a smaller hospital with limited staffing. There is a need to ensure that the patients are safe while still maintaining operations. For example, overnight pharmacist at one of our hospitals is also responsible for compounding. If this overnight pharmacist fails the testing and cannot compound, then he or she will be forced to stop working for at minimum 14 days. Obtaining coverage for a night shift pharmacist for more than 14 days or 14 days will be a really tough task, and that will lead to a further staffing disruption, staff fatigue, and ultimately a less safe environment for our patients. Our recommendation is to treat the situation analogs to what happens when a secondary engineering control fails in an IV room, which allows for compounding with the segregated compounding area beyond use dating. Similar to that, staff who fails the testing should be allowed to continue compounding but be forced to use an immediate use beyond use dating for anything that they compound. This compromise will keep patients safe while still allowing hospital pharmacists to stay operational. Thank you for giving an opportunity.
All right, the next request for comment is from Lori Anello. Lori Anello, you should be able to unmute.
Hello?
All right. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Lori Anello, and I've been in the fire service for 40 years. My dad was a volunteer battalion chief in Guerneville Fire Protection District and a paid fire captain in the East Bay. I started my fire service career at 14 as a dispatcher, and at 15 I became a volunteer firefighter. I was fortunate to be able to work with my dad as a volunteer firefighter, and then later we worked together as paid firefighters. While working as a paid firefighter for 20 years, I also became the fire chief for my local volunteer fire department. In retirement, I am a station battalion chief with the Gold Ridge Fire Protection District. In December of 2017, shortly after the devastating Tubbs fires in Sonoma County, I was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. As soon as my doctor said the words cancer, I felt in my heart that it was most likely caused from my many years of firefighting, caused from all the chemicals that come through our lungs and skin. These chemicals are in the smoke, or not only in the smoke, but they are also in the protective gear we wear and the foam we use to spray on fires. Firefighters are out there saving lives, knowing that we are putting our own lives at risk. It's not that we are complaining, we love our jobs, but the weight we carry knowing we might get sick, seeing our brothers and sisters get diagnosed with illnesses, and some die from these illnesses is so hard to deal with. For the longest time, we thought there wasn't anything we could do. Then a couple years ago, a couple nonprofit organizations and doctors started showing up at the base camps of our big fires. They also came to our fire stations. They offered us an alternative. They offered us hope. They offered us glutathione. The doctors explained how toxic chemicals get stuck in our fat cells in our lungs. They told us we could breathe this medicine through a nebulizer or get it in an IV. We had never heard of it before, but firefighters will try anything once. Well, let me tell you, it works. You can feel it working. My husband is a fire captain, and he and I both did 2 weeks of glutathione breathing treatments, and it was a game changer. The cough I had forever, the tightness in my chest gone, and the same happened for my husband. We are believers. This stuff works. I've been through absolute hell with my cancer, not just the disease, but also the treatment. Several surgeries, chemo, radiation, etc. That stuff makes you sick. Glutathione can help with all of this. I've been wanting to try the IVs because the toxins that cause my cancer are still in my body. But you are telling me that you, the members of the California Board of Pharmacy, won't take this medicine away from me and my firefighters. You are telling me that California is about to become the only state in the country to ban glutathione. This makes no sense to me. The FDA thinks we should have access to it, but you don't? How dare you? I wish my dad would have had access to this medication years ago. I wish my dad could do his own glutathione treatment, but it's too late for him. The nearly 40 years of firefighting has taken an irreversible toll on my dad's health. But I won't let you stop the rest of us from saving our lives. Firefighters love a good fight. It's right there in our name. We'll keep fighting until we preserve the access to this medication, not just for us, but for everyone, because we are firefighters, and that's what we do. Thank you.
All right, and it looks like Dr. Osborne may have the ability to unmute now, so we'll try for Dr. Virginia Osborne one more time. And Dr. Osborne, are you able to unmute yourself?
Yes.
There you go.
Thank you very much. I finally got the signal. Yes, this is Dr. Virginia Osborne. I'm CEO of International IV Nutritional Therapy for Physicians. We have been training physicians and pharmacists and other practitioners throughout the world for over 25 years, and direct cellular nutrition. And this includes glutathione, an amino acid, the basics for all of us. There's been a lot of great testimonial today to all of that. I'm just here to tell you that we train them in the safety and efficacy of glutathione and the sterility and the care for all the patients. And that's the public that we're working with here. And as a clinician, I can tell you through all of my experience, the glutathione, as has been testified today, has been a game changer for many of their health cares. So I just want you to understand, once again, that there is education on this. There is the ability for them to understand it. The only thing that we find is that I get all the calls and the emails from physicians and the public, where can I get glutathione? You are regulating it way too far, and please, this is something that is basic. It provides oxygen to the cells and detox to the cells, as you've heard today. So I appreciate your consideration in that glutathione still be available and become more available in the state of California, because I have licenses in many other states, at least 5, and we don't have this kind of regulation there. So thank you, and I appreciate your time.
All right, and next we have a comment from Michael Blair. Michael, you should see a prompt to unmute yourself. And Michael, you're unmuted.
Hi, my name is Michael Blair. I've been a pharmacist for over 40 years and have spent the past 25 years working in the area of prescription compounding for veterinary patients. I appreciate the opportunity to provide comments to the proposed changes to Title 16, Article 4.5, specifically Section 1735.1, subsection E, as it relates to compounding non-sterile preparations for veterinary office use. First, I would like to applaud the fact that the California Board of Pharmacy recognizes the need for veterinarians to be able to acquire and maintain a supply of compounded medications for use in their office and for dispensing to patients. Veterinarians often treat animals in situations where a few hours, let alone several days, can make a significant difference in health outcomes. This is especially true for small or exotic animal patients whose treatment must often begin immediately in order to avoid further morbidity or mortality. Many compounded medications that veterinarians prescribe are not available at a local pharmacy and must be ordered from pharmacies that specialize in compounding veterinary medications. It is therefore crucial for veterinarians to not only have certain medications in their offices to begin treatment at the moment of diagnosis, but the medication must be available in enough supply to provide to the animal's owner for administration at home. This ensures that treatment is uninterrupted while a prescription is filled for the animal patient by a compounding pharmacy, as it can take up to a week for an animal's owner to receive the compounded medication. Section 1735.1, subsection E2, states a reasonable quantity of a compounded non-sterile preparation may be furnished to a veterinary office for use by the veterinarian that is sufficient for furnishing of not more than a 7-day supply, as fairly estimated by the prescriber and documented on the purchase order or other documentation submitted to the pharmacy prior to furnishing it. Surveys by several state veterinary medical associations have found that 76 to 92% of veterinarians believe that a limit on dispensed medications' day supply would have a negative to very negative impact on their ability to care for their patients. The reasons why a short day supply is problematic are both therapeutic and practical. For example, a standard course of antibiotic is 10 to 14 days. However, it is likely that an animal will show signs of recovery by 5 days. In many cases, it has been found that the animal owner will not bother to fill the additional 3 to 7 day supply of medication to complete the therapy, believing instead that the patient is cured. And as pharmacists, we know this is true with FDA-approved products as well as in human patients. Furthermore, the added expense of purchasing a 7-day supply of medication from the veterinarian as well as purchasing the remainder from a compounding pharmacy, may cause animal owners to not comply or to refuse therapy altogether. As pharmacists and health professionals, we know that incomplete antibiotic therapy can lead to reinfection, superinfection, and antimicrobial resistance. Several states, including Florida, Illinois, and Minnesota, allow veterinarians to dispense from office use stock with no restrictions on day supply. Recently, both the Iowa Board of Pharmacy and the Maine Board of Pharmacy approved regulations allowing for dispensing from compounded office use stock up to a 14-day supply. I recognize and appreciate that the board, in its proposed language, is increasing the day supply of compounded medication from office stock to 7 days from the current 5. But what is the purpose of having pharmacists sit on the board if we do not apply our professional knowledge to the formulation of public policy? Therefore, I would encourage the California Board of Pharmacy to consider raising the dispensing limit to 14 days for antibiotics and antimicrobials. I believe this is consistent with the board's mission to protect the public safety while helping to ensure more positive therapeutic outcomes. Thank you.
All right, next we have comment from Stephen Shane. And Stephen, you should see a prompt to unmute yourself. And Stephen, you're unmuted.
Okay. Hello, board and everyone here. Good morning, and thank you very much for your time. You can all hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Thank you. I'm Battalion Chief Steve Shane with Gold Ridge Fire. I'm a firefighter at heart, so my comment's just going to be short and sweet. I'm really grateful to be here today as I just got back from a stint on a fire yesterday, and I'm here to be the voice of the firefighters who can't be here today because they're still out on the line doing what it is that we do. As you've heard, when we fight fire, we are surrounded by toxins and inadvertently get that into our bodies. Glutathione and methyl B12 help us remove the toxins we take in. If these compounds are effectively made illegal for dispensing in California, then you're taking away one of our tools to remain healthy. For all the firefighters out there working hard to keep California safe, please don't take away the tools we need to stay healthy. You count on us to put out fires. We count on you to help us remain healthy. Please don't make our jobs riskier. Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Tricia, this is Maria in Sacramento. I understand that we probably have more than 12 additional commenters. Is that correct?
Yes.
So I think in light of the number that we should break for lunch and reconvene at 1 o'clock. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a pleasant lunch, and thank you to those brave souls that came back to us in Sacramento. I know we have quite a few people on WebEx. Thank you for your patience. Tricia, are you recording, and can you hear me?
I can hear you, and we are recording.
Great. We're ready to continue with public comment via WebEx.
Fantastic. All right, the next comment will be from CJM, and CJM, you should see a prompt to unmute yourself. We'll try that one more time. All right, we'll come back to CJM. Maybe they're not back yet from lunch. All right. So our next comment will be from Lou Storzinger. And Lou, you should be able to mute yourself.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Lou Storzinger, and I'm a career fire captain for the Sonoma County Fire District, a volunteer fire captain for the Gold Ridge Fire District, as well as a member of the International Association of Firefighters, Local 1401, and I've been on the job for 27 years. Ironically, I almost missed my chance to address this board as I just came off the line from fighting the point fire here in Sonoma County, and I can guarantee that I will spend at least the next week coughing up products of combustion, having headaches, and generally feeling the effects of a large incident. Just one of hundreds of fires I have been to across my career. The fire service has made many changes throughout my career, but none more significant than the health and safety enhancements it has in the last few. Cancer prevention and mental health have been at the forefront of fire service leadership and fire service organizations such as unions and nonprofits, and it has made a dramatic change. We have done our part to reduce cancer-causing materials in our job and reduce our exposure to cancer-causing materials in our job. A few years ago, I was introduced to glutathione, and I can't tell you the difference it made. I no longer wheezed. I felt better. My general health took a turn for the best. And as I started looking to see how we could get this across the entire fire service to my brothers and sisters here in California, imagine my shock when I found out that a government body was going to be standing in the way and essentially making glutathione illegal, preventing the very people who are out there rescuing Californians on a daily basis from prolonging their lives and having something given back to them after they've given so much. I can guarantee the board has probably had enough of hearing from the fire service today. We're a loud and boisterous bunch. When we find something that we want to latch our teeth into, we're not going to let go. If you continue down this road, in my career, I have found that we're not going to go away. You will hear from all of us, from the more than 35,000 firefighters across the state of California, from the International Association of Firefighters, which is made up of more than 3,500 affiliates representing 346,000 members across the United States and Canada, and from the hundreds of thousands of volunteer firefighters who essentially do this for nothing. Please do not stand in the way of letting these people take back their lives from so much that they have given. Access to this is your problem. It should not be in our court that we have to fight the fight to have a medication that can prolong our lives and give us part back of what we've given. Thank you, and have a good day.
All right, the next comment will be from John Gray. And John Gray, you'll see a prompt to unmute yourself. Go ahead and do that.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I'm John Gray. I'm a registered pharmacist with Kaiser Permanente. Thanks for the opportunity to provide comments to amplify elements of our previously submitted written comments. Kaiser Permanente supports common sense compounding standards that promote the preparation of safe and effective compounded drug products. Just as the USP Expert Committee created the USP compounding standards using deliberative and evidence-based processes, we believe that any state compounding regulations that exceed the requirements in the USP compounding chapter should be supported by high-quality empirical evidence. The board claims that its USP Plus approach to regulating compounding is necessary to protect California consumers. However, throughout the rulemaking process, including the publication of this rulemaking package, the board has failed to provide any empirical evidence, such as peer-reviewed journal articles, meta-analyses, etc., to support any of its proposed compounding regulations. In the initial statement of reasons for this rulemaking, the board claims that it considered two alternative options, which it determined would not be more effective in carrying out the purpose for which the action is proposed, nor would it be as effective and less burdensome to affected private persons and equally effective in achieving the purposes of the regulation. The two alternatives that the board says it considered were not implementing the proposed regulation and not establishing additional regulatory standards beyond the minimum national standards set by USP. Kaiser Permanente disagrees with the board's conclusion that establishing additional regulatory requirements is more effective and less burdensome than simply choosing to enforce the USP compounding chapters. During the board's February 2023 Enforcement Committee meeting, the board presented photographs showing dirty and disorganized pharmacies, ostensibly as evidence that the USP Plus approach to regulating compounding is necessary to protect the health and welfare of California residents. While we acknowledge the unacceptable state of the pharmacies in the photographs presented by the board, we strongly disagree that the photographs presented by the board provide substantial evidence, as defined in California Government Code Section 11349A, of the need for the proposed regulation. The pharmacies in the photographs presented by the board were almost certainly in violation of existing Board of Pharmacy regulations, for example, 16 CCR 1714C and 1735.6B, as well as USP standards, for example, USP 795 4.1. If the problem that board inspectors have encountered in pharmacies, that compounded medications are violation, if these problems that the board encountered in pharmacies are already violations of regulations that the board enforces, then these photographs provide no evidence that additional regulations are needed. We have focused our discussion of the evidence presented by the board on photographs presented at the February 2023 Enforcement and Compounding Committee meeting because the board has not presented any other evidence to justify this rulemaking in any other public forum. The notice of proposed action for this regulation, the board claims that the board is not aware of any negative cost impact that a representative private person or business would necessarily incur in reasonable compliance with the proposed actions. We find that claim dubious. It ought to have been clear to the board that the proposed requirements to change outer chemotherapy gloves in 16 CCR 1737.7C and disposable preparation mats in 16 CCR 1737.13A after each HD drug preparation would likely have a material impact on supply costs for pharmacies. Kaiser Permanente conservatively estimates these two requirements alone will increase our organization's supply costs by $4.5 million per year. We further estimate that the additional time it takes to change gloves and preparation mats is likely to require additional compounding personnel, resulting in an estimated $2.8 million increase in annual labor costs. We expect other organizations, and we heard from some today, are likely to experience similar cost impacts. As such, we encourage the board to reassess the potential economic impacts of this regulation, and if required, provide the analysis required by California Government Code, Section 11346.5A7. Finally, the rulemaking package did not include information about when the board intends for the proposed regulation to take effect. It would take a great deal of time and money for organizations to change practices and potentially their physical plant to meet these requirements. Therefore, we implore the board to set an effective date for the regulations that will provide the regulated public with ample time to come into compliance with these new regulations. We suggest that at least 1 year from the date that the regulation is filed with the Secretary of State would be a reasonable and effective date. Ultimately, in our view, both with respect to the evidence supporting the need for regulations and specific elements of the proposed regulation, the board first shot the arrow by making the determination that regulation is necessary and then drew the bullseye around where it landed. Given the board's failure to provide substantial evidence, we suggest that the board either present bona fide evidence that the regulation is necessary or cancel this rulemaking and simply enforce USP as currently written and required under 416.8.
All right, the next request for comment is from Sam. Sam, you should see a prompt to unmute yourself. And Sam, you're unmuted.
Hi, I'm Sam Martinez, a licensed pharmacist from UC San Diego Health. I'd like to thank you for giving us the chance to speak on this very important topic of sterile compounding that will have a wide-ranging impacts on our pharmacy practices. I've also provided written comments. I agree with the previous speakers that being bogged down on process versus actually focusing on providing safe patient care should be the priority. I agree with what other speakers have said in terms of increased economic burden with unclear patient care impact, like using sterile mats. Another speaker also pointed out a double standard for pharmacy practice has been created for practices operating under a Board of Pharmacy license versus a medical license, driving patients potentially to sites that are not even meeting the basic standards of USP. We should stick to evidence-based recommendations like we learned in pharmacy school versus things that seem like a good idea. I would ask that the Board of Pharmacy be more transparent on their recommendations, such as providing evidence-based guidance on what they're recommending and a clear background on what they're proposing, so it helps us all be on the same page in terms of implementation. There are some very unclear parts of the proposed recommendations. We are in, such as in 1736.1, there's a lot of documentation there that's being proposed, and most things are an electronic medical record. So as long as it's available to the board in a timely fashion, that should be sufficient. 1737.6, environmental wipe sampling. Please provide more specific requirements on a minimum standard frequency and evidence-based guidance on this topic, because we want to do the right thing, but we're given no guidance. This is why USB 800 has this as a shall versus a clear standard. 1737.5, facilities engineering controls. There's no published or agreed upon list of volatile HDs. Some guidance on this would be helpful. A pass-through is not allowed between the SCC into an unclassified space. This will have a wide-ranging impact on many pharmacies and cause a large economic impact, including another round of complete compounding room redesign. Most pharmacies have already undergone extensive remodels just to comply with USP 10797, and now this will require a whole new set of potential remodels, and some pharmacies may have to shut down or change their operations. Then in the next section, there's a requirement for a very expensive HEPA purge pass-through, which also creates complexity and cost in redesign. We already do extensive environmental testing that shows any pattern of growth. So these new changes just seem to be a nice to have instead of evidence-based recommendations. More transparency will engage your licensed pharmacists to work collaboratively with the board so we can all provide safe and effective patient care. I would recommend first allowing sterile compounding sites to continue to work on implementing the fairly new USP 797 and 800 standards before adding additional standards. Thank you very much.
All right, our next comment is going to be from Dara Thompson. One moment. All right, Dara Thompson, you should be able to unmute. Try that one more time. Dara. All right, Dara Thompson, you're unmuted.
Thank you so much. My name is Dr. Dara Thompson. I am the chair of the California Board of Naturopathic Medicine, and we have significant concerns about public safety with these changes in regulation for the very basic reason that we believe it will prevent patients from receiving essential medications. So I don't have a lot of details. So many people have provided excellent examples and details of this now. But as a board, we just want to say we have very significant concerns about public safety if these compounded medications are made less available. Thank you.
All right, and next we have Lucas Evanson. Lucas, you should be able to unmute.
Ms. Lucas Evanson. I'm speaking on behalf of the California Medical Association. CMA thanks the board for providing the opportunity for public comment. CMA has been contacted by physicians concerned that the deletion of the in pharmacies text at the beginning of Article 4.5 means that these regulations apply to physician offices. The board's initial statement of reasons and the meetings leading up to the regulatory notice suggest that it's the board's intent for the regulations to apply to licensees of the board. CMA asks the board to clarify that these regulations only apply to compounding of drugs by licensees of the Board of Pharmacy. Additionally, CMA asks that the board consider timely patient access to compounded drugs, particularly in a hospital setting when establishing requirements beyond those in USP. Thank you.
All right, and next we have comment from Rick Rhodes. And Rick Rhodes, you should be able to unmute yourself.
It's good. Good afternoon. Thank you very much. My name is Rick Rhodes. I'm the Director of Compounding at University Compounding Pharmacy. I do want to make a couple of comments. I did submit some written comments, but I wanted to make some verbal comments as well. I know the board has done a lot of work to align with USP, which is, in my view, a very positive thing. I think we're much a better spot now than we've been in the past. And so I think, we all know that USP is, the standard, the gold standard for nationally for compounding standards. The issue, I think, is that when we go above what's in USP, it does create some problems. And I wanted to kind of highlight a couple of those and why they become somewhat problematic. Under 1736.1E, for example, there's a prohibition on using API when you could use a commercially sterile manufactured product. This can become problematic for a lot of reasons, but one of it which is that it becomes very unclear about how this will be interpreted and enforced. And that's a big issue for compounders as we try to comply and we deal with regular inspections about how that will be enforced. I also don't think it's actually will promote patient safety, because if you're using API and you also have a commercially available, if one of the ingredients is a commercially available product, you're still doing non-sterile to sterile compounding. For category 3 compounders, we spent a lot of money on stability tests. If one of the ingredients in the commercially available products changes, which happens very often, NDCs go in and out of stock, the whole stability profile of that CSP is going to change. And so you'll have to redo the studies. And these studies, they're $30,000 to $70,000 per study. They're very expensive. I've done many of them. And so that, I think, is one example of where the interpretation and the enforcement becomes a problem. And I think what's in USP is sufficient for patient safety in that regard. The other one, I know there was a comment earlier about this, about C of A's and about having the manufacturer's name and address on the C of A. This is 1736.9. This is, I think, again, problematic because most suppliers do not put the C of A name, manufacturer, and address on it. And so it specifically states now that you cannot use that API. That it will immediately become very, very problematic. It would be my hope to either remove that or have allow for some workaround where the compounder could call and somehow assess that was in a manufactured in an FDA registered facility. The last one, or actually I have two more quick ones in regards to compounding mats under 1737.13. This would be for hazardous drug compounding, and the requirement for using a hazardous drug mat. This is not something I see anywhere. It's very rare, in my personal opinion, for people to use these mats. It'd be a significant change, and I don't think it would really promote public patient safety or the safety of the personnel to make a blanket requirement for all drugs, all dosage forms, all risk levels of hazardous drugs. And so I think that would really impact the chain. It would impact the practice of compounding in a negative way, and I don't think it's necessary. The last thing, and I didn't include this on my written comments, but I do feel that it's important for me to say, to make an oral comment, and that's the reference to informational chapters, which I think is good. To reference them in a way is a good thing because there's a lot of good information in there. I think the problem is that trying to enforce informational chapters is going to be, again, really problematic from a consistency standpoint and an interpretation standpoint. And I think most people know, and I know the board knows this as well, that those chapters are not intended to be enforced. I think the problem is they're not written in a way, they're not written as an enforceable standard. So if you look at the language of how the language is written, and if you read the chapters, which I've done many times, it would be very difficult to fully comply with that. And so my recommendation is, if the board has something specific, to go in those chapters and actually pull that out of something specific in those chapters of what you want to enforce. But just to reference that, I think will be really difficult to do. And compounders, we've been trying to make those changes based on the USP. And then to have something where it's unclear about how it's going to be enforced, I think that's where it would be very problematic. But I do want to,
15-second
thank the
warning.
board. I just want to thank the board for aligning with USP. The more you do that, I think the better it is for patient safety and also for compounders as well. Thank you very much.
All right, and next we have Sean Nurian. Sean, you should be able to unmute yourself. All right, Sean Nurian, we'll try that one more time. If you see a prompt to unmute, go ahead and click on it. All right, Sean, you're unmuted.
Thank you for the opportunity to address the board on these important issues affecting patients in California. My name is Sean Norian, and I sit on the board of the Alliance for Pharmacy Compounding, representing the interests of thousands of compounders. And I'm also the founder and CEO of Empower Pharmacy, a compounding pharmacy and outsourcing facility, which over the past 15 years has helped patients in all 50 states attain access to quality, affordable compounds. Today, I want to bring to light the critical issues compounding pharmacies and outsourcing facilities face due to the board's current and proposed policies surrounding USP guidelines. Compounding pharmacies have long been essential in providing tailored medications to meet the unique needs of patients. However, Recent board actions have significantly restricted access to crucial medications, such as methylcobalamin. This vitamin B12 derivative is vital in treating autism, offering substantial benefits to those on the spectrum. Unfortunately, parents in California are struggling to obtain this medication because the board has targeted compounding pharmacies to reduce it, threatening revocation or non-removal of their sterile compounding licenses. As a father of an autistic child, I can empathize deeply with the suffering these families endure. Denying access to methylcobalamin not only affects the patients, but also places an immense emotional and financial burden on their families. This is an unjust consequence of policies that seem to overlook the therapeutic value and necessity of compounded medications for vulnerable populations. Moreover, the board's lack of action on outsourcing facility license applications exacerbates this problem. My own application has been in limbo for nearly 18 months, with no clear communication on why it remains unprocessed. This delay prevents us from supplying life-saving drugs to patients who desperately need them. Many outsourcing facilities face similar challenges, leading to a significant bottleneck in medication availability. The board's approach creates a severe patient issue by simultaneously restricting compounding pharmacies and preventing outsourcing facilities from operating in their state. This dual restriction denies millions of patients access to essential medications through both traditional and non-traditional channels. It is imperative that the board reconsider its stance and work collaboratively with compounding pharmacies and outsourcing facilities to ensure that patients receive the medications they need. In conclusion, I urge the California State Board of Pharmacy to address these issues promptly. The health and well-being of countless patients depends on your actions. Let us work together to create a regulatory environment that supports the safe and effective compounding of essential medications like methylcobalamin, ensuring that all patients have access to the treatments we need. Thank you.
All right, and next we'll hear from Cherie Lowe. Cherie, you should be able to unmute yourself. All right, Cherie, we'll try that one. Oh, there you go, you're unmuted. And Cherie, you are unmuted. If you're talking, we can't hear you.
I'm sorry, I had not started speaking. I was waiting for affirmation that I was
All
done.
right.
Good afternoon, Chair, members, and staff. My name is Cherie Lowe, and I am the BP for Pharmaceutical Services for the California Hospital Association. CHA represents over 400 hospitals in California, including very small hospitals, 6 beds on Catalina Island, all the way up to very large hospitals that have over 1,000 inpatient beds. These hospitals are located in both rural and urban areas in our state of California. CHA has submitted written comments, and we now offer the following additional information during this public comment period. I think all of you know hospitals in California are continuing to rebound from the devastating impact of the COVID pandemic to our patients, our staff, and our hospital physical plants themselves. This is true in our pharmacy services as well. And yes, we, like everyone else, are struggling to secure an adequate workforce, but we are also struggling to make sure our patients have access to the care, treatment, and pharmaceutical needs, both within the walls of our hospitals and once they are discharged to their next level of care. As an organization representing hospitals, we question the necessity of these regulations and do not feel, honestly, that they are meaningful, nor that they will enhance the protections or promote the health and safety of Californians. We don't make this statement lightly, but we do make the statement in light of the extensive federal USP standards already in place and already successfully implemented by our hospital pharmacies. We have also not seen the board produce any substantial evidence that hospital pharmacies are failing to follow either the board's current pharmacy compounding regulations or the very detailed federal USP standards. Again, questioning the necessity of this regulatory package. We believe these regulations are duplicative and resource intensive and lack any high quality empirical evidence that they are even necessary. Finally, There are substantial costs for implementing these proposed regulations. We have not been able to locate a comprehensive benefit cost analysis to assess whether these regs will achieve their intended goals without undue impact on resources for patient care. I feel compelled to reinforce for all of you that over 50% of our hospitals currently are operating in the red, and an additional 20% of our state's hospitals are operating in extreme financial distress. This is occurring as the California State Legislature and the California Department of Healthcare Access and Information are working diligently to lower healthcare costs. We don't believe these regulations are necessary, and we believe they will simply increase cost and further impede access for consumers. In closing, we recommend you table these proposed regulations and allow the USP standards, which are well vetted using deliberative and evidence-based processes in their development, to be our state standard as currently allowed in state law. I look forward to our continued dialogue with the board and improving safe medication and pharmacy access for all Californians. Thank you so much.
All right, and next we're going to hear from Steve Aker. Steve, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Good afternoon, board. My name is Steve Aker, and I am the fire chief of the Sonoma Valley Fire District. I've been a firefighter for 36 years. I'm also the president of the Sonoma County Fire Chiefs Association, a member of the Cal Chiefs Executive Board, and the president of a statewide JPA that provides workers' comp and employee benefits to over 200 fire service agencies. I am among many progressive fire service executive leaders who are passionate and committed to improving our firefighters' health and well-being. Over the course of my career, many friends have come down with cancer, including 3 very close firefighter friends who died far too young, at ages 35, 50, and 57 from job-related cancers. We have had 3 of our district members be diagnosed in the last 2 years. I see firefighters with job-related cancer every day, and its effect on them and their families are devastating. We need to do as much as we can to prevent cancer in our firefighters. I and my department believe in cancer prevention measures and treatments very strongly. We were initially part of a group and have been fortunate to be able to participate in the detoxification program the last 2 years here in the North Bay. As you know, in the North Bay, we have been very adversely affected by significant fire incidents over the last 7 years. So far, 10 of our members, including me, and many more to come, have seen how this detoxification program has greatly reduced the amount of cancer-causing toxins in our bodies. We have also seen better liver function, and we just simply have more energy and feel better as a result of this program. The primary tool used to detox, as you have heard, is compound glutathione. With these points in mind, we need to expand the tools and resources available to our doctors, not limit them. Through my many active roles locally and statewide, I am pushing hard to expand these preventative treatment programs. This is truly an example of an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. The amount of money that we spend on cancer-related treatments and deaths and death benefits to families is astronomical compared to what the cost of putting a firefighter through these preventative treatment programs. And that doesn't even take into account what is most important in this, and that is the emotional devastation that families and firefighters feel with the cancer diagnosis. If we can prevent just one cancer-caused death through these preventative treatments, all of these efforts are worth it. Please consider this topic before you very thoughtfully and carefully. The decision could have drastic effects on firefighters' health and their families. While we signed up to serve and we willingly put our lives on the line protecting others, part of this was not the fact that we accepted getting cancer. Please do not take away the access to real, proven cancer preventative treatments for us, now and into the future. Thank you very much for your consideration and the opportunity to address you.
All right, and the next request for comment is from Tennille Davis. Tennille, you should see a prompt to mute yourself. Go ahead and click on that. All right, Tennille, you are unmuted.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Tennille Davis, and I'm the Chief Advocacy Officer with the Alliance for Pharmacy Compounding. I'm also an experienced compounding pharmacist. Thank you for this opportunity to comment on the California proposed regulations concerning compounded drug products. Our association represents a significant portion of the compounding industry, and we have serious concerns about certain provisions in the proposed regulations. While we understand and respect the board's mission to protect California citizens, we believe some of these proposals will have unintended negative consequences on patient care and access to medications their doctors have judged necessary. We have submitted detailed comments in writing. In total, we identified 57 specific places where the proposed regulations exceed what is required in federal law and by the compounding chapters of the U.S. Pharmacopoeia. In none of those instances has the board demonstrated how these excessive regulations make patients safer. First, the proposed prohibition on compounding with FDA interim bulks list items in Category 1, such as glutathione, methylcobalamin, and DMPS, is particularly troubling. These substances are vital for patients who have no other suitable treatment options. For example, glutathione is essential for patients with oxidative stress disorders, while methylcobalamin is crucial for those with certain neurological conditions. DMPS is used in the emergency room to treat heavy metal poisoning. Denying access to these compounded medications could significantly impact patient health and well-being. And I must note, the FDA clearly allows compounding of items on the interim bulks list, and it could be argued that FDA and federal law preempt California's ability to treat those substances differently. Additionally, the California board has indicated in writing as recently as yesterday to an attorney that it is FDA that determines whether a drug can be distributed and or sold, not the board. The proposed regulation on allergenic extract compounding are excessively stringent. The requirement to use a dedicated PEC solely for allergenic extracts and the classification of these extracts under Category 1 or 2 only with these short beyond use dates will severely limit patient access to these necessary treatments. These requirements go beyond federal standards and do not offer a clear benefit in terms of patient safety. They seem to be regulations for the sake of more regulations, a way for the board to penalize ethical, conscientious compounders rather than enforce current regulation on non-compliant pharmacies. For some of the proposed regulations, the industry products and services available are not set up to support compliance, even if compounders licensed in your state aim to comply. For example, excipient suppliers that must be FDA registered manufacturers and the printed original manufacturer name and address and a certificate of analysis of the API are not currently standards in the industry. Importantly, despite the board's assertion that these changes will not have an economic impact on small businesses, many compounding pharmacies are indeed small businesses and will face significant financial burdens to comply, potentially driving some out of business. We don't argue that there should not be a cost of compliance, but we do argue that the board is required to acknowledge and properly estimate that cost. Those costs will not only impact pharmacies, but also the patients who rely on their specialized services. In conclusion, we respectfully request that the board reconsider these provisions and align more closely with national standards, such as those established by the U.S. Pharmacopoeia. Doing so will help ensure that patients in California continue to have access to essential compounded medications while maintaining safety and compliance. And you'll provide clear, bright-line compliance standards for pharmacies to follow. For these reasons, we urge that the California Board of Pharmacy delay adoption of this rule and include it in the sunset review process so that legislators can have a more formal input into this process. Thank you for your consideration of our input.
All right, the next request for comment is from Dr. Jen Riegel or Riegel. One moment. All right, Dr. Jen Riegel or Riegel, you should be able to unmute.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to address the board. I am a naturopathic doctor who owns a private practice in Santa Rosa, California. I am also a co-founder and the medical director for a nonprofit that provides care during wildfire emergencies in partnership with local fire agencies and the American Red Cross. My practice consists of both treating civilian populations as well as in large portion firefighters throughout Sonoma and Marin counties. My experience of two of the substances that would be impacted by this change in regulation, both glutathione and methylcobalamin, is that they have incredibly important and efficacious use in practice with an incredible safety profile as well. I am aware of the intention of the board to keep our patients safe. Unfortunately, I think the proposed actions will cause incredible harm to my patients without benefit. I am unaware of any serious complaints of either substance from the public and can personally, just in my practice, tell you of thousands of individuals who have received substantial, often life-changing benefit from them. A large portion of my practice is the testing and treatment of our firefighters whose health has been impacted at unprecedented levels in the last 5 to 10 years. Thousands of firefighters in Northern California have been treated with nebulized and IV glutathione, with often life-changing positive impact for these men and women. We found these compounds to be safe and effective for our first responders in treatment of smoke inhalation injury and long-term exposures to toxins. In fact, nebulized and intravenous glutathione are keystones of treatment in our protocols. As we collect data using subjective and objective measures, we find for the first time that we know of that our firefighters are not only getting significant relief from their symptoms, but also reversal of disease and improvement in testing parameters. In addition to firefighters, these compounds have been integral in the treatment of civilian populations exposed to smoke in our area, as well as a broad range of other conditions. In closing, given the significant harm I believe this would cause for patients in California and the incredible safety profile of these substances as they are currently regulated, I urge you to reconsider the current action. Thank you.
All right, and I'm going to circle back to CJM to see if they're able to unmute at this time. So CJM, are you able to unmute? Try that one more time. All right, so maybe they logged in and stepped away. And my understanding is that people can only speak once. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, we did have 2 Sams logged in. I don't know if it was the same person logged in twice, but I don't know if this request for comment is a duplicate or not. So we'll just find out. Sam, if you've already spoken, then we can't have you speak again. So if this is a different Sam than we've heard from before, go ahead and unmute. But if you've already spoken...
It's actually a different Sam.
Okay, good.
My name's Sam Kim. I'm the sterile compound manager for medicine at USC.
I'm sorry. Can you start over and speak more loudly? We didn't get your name.
Oh, sure. It's Sam Kim. Are you able to hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right, great. All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'd just like to take the opportunity for allowing me to comment on the proposed regulations. And as others have pointed out, the USP 797 updated chapter updated their requirements for sterile compounding, and one of these are for the personal training and evaluation to more stringent guidelines. The additional personnel training requirements in section 1736.2 and 3 lacks any sufficient evidence that is necessary. The cost to our health system in labor and resources will be substantial with the additional requirements that the board is proposing. Specifically, the board is proposing in 1736.3C that donning and doffing of the garb shall not occur in the anteroom at the same time. But in USP 797, it's more of a recommendation that does not occur. And again, there's lack of any evidence that this helps with contamination. And current practices in almost all IB rooms that I know of, this does occur frequently without an increase in environmental growth in any of our sampling or certification processes. One of the other points that I do want to highlight is regarding the hazardous drug wipe sampling. I know others have pointed out as well, but I do want to highlight that that's a good example of a regulation that the board is proposing that currently has no evidence for or any guidance for us to follow. Specifically, there's no standard for acceptable limits for hazardous drug contamination. We don't have any guidance on what is an acceptable level if we were to test positive on any of the drug samples. There's also no certifying agencies for vendors for wipe sample kits. There's a lack of standardization in that as well. And this is why USP 800 issues that as a should, a recommendation rather than a shall. I think the board's intent, is in good effort and good faith to help protect the patients, but the proposed regulation is above USP. We do need some evidence as to why they want to go above and beyond that, rather than opinions or anything else. So what we're looking for, as everyone has pointed out, is evidence-based. Just like when we practice medicine, it's evidence-based, and that is all I have to say for today. Thank you for your time.
All right, this is the moderator, and I see no further requests for comment.
Great, thank you. Since there are no other comments at this time.
Oh, I'm sorry, I spoke too soon. Someone raised their hand. Shall I get this last person?
Please do, thank you.
Okay, this is Rafa or Rafa. Please unmute yourself. You should see a button to do that. There you go, you're unmuted.
Good afternoon.
Rafa?
Good afternoon, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for reaching out that hand at the last moment. In closing, I'd like to speak on behalf of not only the California citizens, but the entire citizens of this nation. I am also a reverend, so I tend to the people's needs, both spiritual, personal, mentally. I'm also a retired staff sergeant of the United States Air Force. I'm a combat wounded warrior. I'm this nation's top tier of priority when it comes to medical care and treatment, and I chose to come home after being wounded in both Saudi Arabia and Iraq to the freedoms of this nation under the right of sovereignty and unalienable birthrights, especially the access to care, especially under the Veterans Act for care. For California to consider to impose any restriction for access to care, not just to the citizens of the state, but especially to the law enforcement, the service members, the defenders fortis of this nation, is absolutely absurd. As an individual, and I can speak on behalf of many fellow service members far and wide, many of us California residents, I am their voice. And when I speak now, I say, we did not sign up and enlist to serve and protect our families and friends, the doctors, the communities, the compounders, you yourselves, the board members, high and low. We did not sign up and enlist to put our lives on the line, to see our friends killed in the act of service, to come home and to hear these absurd ideas that anyone would consider restricting access to our care. I personally have had a 14-year life extension granted to me by these protocols and these compounded advocate medicines that you guys are considering restricting access to. So as a Defenders Fortis and the nation's retired wounded warrior, I really encourage you to table these and highly consider the motive behind this and allow this to be dismissed and grant the doctors, the compounders, and all of us physicians and patients access to this care. It is highly needed. And for someone to deem it unwarranted or to strip it from us should be considered a hostile act. And as a retired wounded warrior, I speak that thoroughly. Thank you very much. And in closing, please consider all comments made today as they are all warranted and hold their value and weight at the table today. Thank you very much.
All right, this is the moderator, and I see no further raised hands.
Great, thank you. Since we've completed our comments both in Sacramento and via WebEx, I just wanted to announce the time is 1:48 p.m. This hearing is now closed. As a reminder, the board will consider all comments received during the written 45-day comment period and the comments received today during a future board meeting. It is anticipated that this will occur at the July 31st and August 1st board meeting. Please monitor the board's website for updates. Thank you for your time and attention, and safe travels.